Hi everybody, and good morning, afternoon or good evening wherever you are in the world, and welcome to day 2 of the 5th annual ICOACHKIDS conference. My name is Gary Hodgson and I'm delighted to be your host for this event. Over the course of today, we have another fantastic lineup exploring future-proofing youth sport with courage and optimism. We're thrilled to be hosting this event today along with world-leading coaching practitioners and researchers that will be sharing their insights, including Dr. Nicole Lavoie, Dr. Tabo Huntley, Dr. Phil Kearney, Jordan Lee, the ICOACHKIDS founding partners, and a fantastic panel featuring Dr. Annette Stride, Elizabeth Thebrian, Nadra Hafiz, Jose Neto, and Paul Carson. We're also proud to be welcoming yet again members from over 60 countries around the world even. For those of you who are Spanish and French speakers, we have a live translation service in both languages available. To access these, just click on the Spain or France flags that are just in the corner here, just above my head. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please ensure that you use the question and answer Q&A function available on the platform, and we will try to ask as many of your questions as we can. And please keep an eye out for any links, QR codes, and references that our speakers may share in their presentations to help you explore their resources further beyond the sessions that we have today. In the meantime, please use the chat function to introduce yourselves and let us know where you're tuning in and from, and to share your own thoughts, ideas, and reflections. Be sure to also check out our website, icoachkids.org, where you can register for free to learn, coach, and connect. Finally, follow us via our social media channels on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. All you need to do is search ICOACHKIDS World and make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and retweet to grow the global movement. As you stay with us today, please post your reflections using the hashtag ICOACHKIDS to continue the conversation. So let's move on to today's proceedings as we dive into future-proofing youth sport, courage and optimism. First up, we have the ICOACHKIDS Pledge. In 2017, ICOACHKIDS undertook a massive literature review on coaching children. The results of this literature review led us to recommend 10 golden rules for coaching children, which were called the ICOACHKIDS Pledge. Later that year, we featured a video on the ICOACHKIDS Pledge as a part of our massive open online courses, which are available at elearning.icoachkids.eu. With many coaches, parents, coach developers, governing bodies, and federations taking the pledge over the last 4 years, we've decided to update our pledge with even more insights on the 10 golden rules. This evening, we're sharing this with the world for the very first time. Helping us to present this work, we've recruited the following ICOACHKIDS partners: Rita Hovarth and Judith Ballo of the Hungarian Coaches Association, Barnaby Sargent-Medjics and Stacey Emmons of Leeds Beckett University, Karen Livingston of the International Council for Coaching Excellence, Sheila Quinn of Sport Ireland Coaching, Chris van der Hagen of the Royal Belgian Football Association, and Katharina Morlang of Deutsche Sportjugend. There'll be opportunities for us to ask questions at the end of the next 2 sessions. So please add your questions about the ICOACHKIDS Pledge into the Q&A section over the course of the next 30 minutes. Now, I'm going to hand over to Sergio Larabertial to take us into the pledge. Over to you, Sergio.
Hi everyone and welcome to ICOACHKIDS. At ICOACHKIDS, we want to help coaches create great experiences for children. Now, we did a massive literature review where we found 10 golden rules to create positive experiences, and we call them the ICOACHKIDS Pledge. I've got a very good group of friends that are going to help you understand what that means in the real world of coaching. There you go, see my friends.
1. Be child-centered. Always have the best interest of children at heart and listen to them. It is about what children want and what they need, not about the adults. What is the child's motivation to be there? Are these motivations different across your group? When you are not speaking, are you listening? What and who do you hear? Who are they? What are each child's physical, psychological, and social needs? Be positive and ask kids what they think. Asking, what do you think you did well today? Could be a great start.
Number 2, be holistic. Develop children in your sessions as people first and foremost, not only as athletes. Aim to develop their psychosocial skills and capacities, not just their physical ones. Sport is just a fraction of their lives. They have other interests too. Ask questions like, how are you? How was your school today? Who are the young people in front of you? How much do you know about them as human beings? Let them show you through their ability to find and solve problems. There are lots of physical, technical and psychosocial skills to learn. Be sure to give kids the time to have a go and practice them.
Be inclusive. Cater for all levels of abilities and motivations. Coaching is far from a one-size-fits-all. Get to know the kids you coach and dare to coach them differently. Ensure that your coaching facilitates learning for children of all shapes, sizes, ethnicities, beliefs, abilities and motivations. Consider the objectives that you set. Are they specific, measurable and achievable to suit each individual? Adapt your coaching for each child. Share your attention with everyone. Members of your learning community may have different belief systems and cultures. Appreciate and value each of these.
Four, make it fun and safe. Children want to have fun, and to learn, they need to feel safe. Build positive relationships and enjoyable and caring climates that allow children to thrive and keep them coming back. Create environments where children enjoy playing and learning. You should ask, when they leave, do they want to come back? Show children that you care for them. Remember, the person before the player. Children should feel safe to learn, ask questions and take risks. Be sure to help them feel safe. Create plenty of opportunities for children to learn and improve. Challenge and stretch them. Let them know that the sky is the limit.
Five, prioritise the love of sport over learning sport. A very small proportion of the children in your group will become elite athletes, but every single one of them can be healthy, active adults. Create that fantastic legacy as part of your job. No matter what their ability, create an environment where children love to be part of sport. A love of sport can keep children active forever. Help them start that journey. If each child you coach has many positive, meaningful experiences in sport, imagine the legacy you have created.
Six, focus on foundational skills. Do not be over-concerned with the specific skills of your sport. At a younger age, kids need to gain essential motor skills and learn the basics of how to play games using generic tactical principles to give yourself the best chance of success. Opportunities to refine basic movement are important. Walk, run, hop, skip, jump, stop and balance should be practiced in isolation and combination. Make sure that kids get opportunities to practice stability, object control and locomotor skills. If you forget, remember, solve. Create opportunities for kids to solve problems in games. Consider the basic principles of attack and defense. Consider the technical and tactical problems in all game types, not just specific sports.
7. Engage parents positively. Parents are not the enemy, but the biggest resource at your disposal. They want the best for their kids, and so do you. Partnership is the key word. You will never know what parents can offer if you don't talk to them. Parents are an important member of the coaching team. They can help you to understand their child even better. Consider how parents might help you to reinforce and deliver key messages from your coaching. Parents are not the enemy, so do not treat them like one. Forge positive working relationships with them. Do not hide the truth from parents. Be transparent from the start and help them to trust you.
Eight, plan progressive programs. We're taking kids on a learning journey, so develop short, medium and long-term goals and a plan that will help kids get there to the destination. It's not about peak by Saturday, nor improving a session off the cuff. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Always make time to plan. Kids do not make progress by chance, so ensure that you plan according to help them get better over time. The reality of coaching is about developing people over the long-term months and years. Be sure to set seasonal goals. Once you've set seasonal goals, break them up into digestible chunks. Consider how each month makes progress towards the long-term goal. Short-term goals are typically weekly or session by session. Make sure that these goals align with the medium and long term to give your kids opportunity to progress.
Nine, use different methods to enhance learning. Learning is a complex process and it doesn't happen overnight. Different coaching and teaching strategies can serve different purposes at different stages of learning and development, complement each other and help us achieve the desired results. Learning is a complex process with many moving parts. Do not underestimate how difficult it can be for kids. Consider the factors that underpin successful learning: wanting, needing doing, making sense, and feedback. There are lots of innovative ways to facilitate learning. Just make sure that the challenges you set are developmentally appropriate for the child. Learning takes time, so we have to be patient with progress. Often we won't see the fruits of our labor until weeks or months down the line, but it's worth the wait.
Use competition in a developmental way. There's nothing wrong with competition. When the format and the atmosphere around the competition is built around the developmental stage of the kids and considerate of their needs, competition is an amazing motivator and a lot of fun. Consider the format of competition and games. The format can help set the right tone for learning and development. Competition can be a great motivator. It may help children set and evaluate goals as well as test what they have learned against their peers. Competition should fit with your long-term plan and the needs of the kids, so make sure it comes at the right time in their journey.
So there you have it, 10 golden rules to make sure that children have a positive experience of sport. We want to encourage coaches, clubs, parents, national and international federations and governments to adopt the pledge so children learn to love sport and stay in sport for life.
Wow, lots of information to digest there. So please keep an eye out on our YouTube channel, on our social media platforms and our website iCoachKids.org to see that video again. To help us bring the ICOACHKIDS pledge to life, I would like to welcome Professor Sergio Larabertial, co-founder of ICOACHKIDS and secretary of the ICOACHKIDS Global Movement Committee. But before we head to Sergio, be sure to post your questions and experiences of the ICOACHKIDS pledge using the Q&A function on the conference platform. Now let's head over to Sergio. Hi, Sergio.
Hi, listen, what an emotional video to watch there. Really great to see all the partners of ICOACHKIDS coming together to put together that video. And really my job over the next 15 or 20 minutes is to bring the ICOACHKIDS pledge to life, okay? Now, I've got an easy job really, to be honest. I was just going back through the list of speakers that we had yesterday. Laura Lundy, Amanda Visek, Hannah Crane, Juanita Weissensteiner, Malcolm Brown, Ann Tibat, and Roberto Martinez. I think all of them gave really great examples of how to bring the ICOACHKIDS pledge to life. I was also saying at the end of that video that we would like to encourage coaches, clubs, national governing bodies, parents to sign up to the pledge, to commit to the pledge. And have to say, that's what we've been trying to do ourselves. We've been trying to lead by example. So what I'm going to present over the next few minutes is my own attempt at trying to bring the ICOACHKIDS pledge to life. It's not easy all the time, and some things work and some things don't. But I'm going to really be trying to offer a very honest and candid account of my experience with trying to apply the pledge. Now, at the same time, I know that a lot of the, all of the coaches that are watching the stream will have their own ideas. So please, I'd love to encourage you as I go down the list. I'd love to encourage you to actually, on the chat, start populating that chat with your own ideas as to how to bring the pledge to life in each of the items. Okay, so that's my challenge to you. As I go through the list, please make sure that you are bringing your own ideas to the chat. Okay, so on that note, what's the rationale? Why do we need the pledge in our view? To me, it's very simple, really. A lot of the times, we tend to think about sport as this magical thing that as soon as a child, comes into contact with sport or goes to a sports club, their life is going to change and be much better. Okay, this element of, it's like the magic lamp, the Aladdin genie. Okay, that as soon as you touch the basketball or the football or whatever it is, your life's better. Now we know that's not the case. We know that sport can also be a negative experience sometimes, and that for a sport to really be a positive experience and to maximize its qualities to have an impact on young people, it really looks a lot more like this, like a game of Tetris, where all the pieces have to fall into place for sport to be a positive experience. And that's what we hope that the pledge is trying to do, identifying the majority of those pieces and how they have to fall so they have a good experience. Okay, so that's just a quick reminder of what the different the 10 elements of the pledge are, for you to have a look at that there. Okay, and let's go one by one. So the first one, be child-centered. Okay, we've talked about the idea of being child-centered, really meaning that as a coach, you have to focus on the needs and the wants of the children, and that everything we do is based on what's best for them. Okay, so how do we put this into practice? Look, it's not easy, okay, because we are adults. So sometimes we struggle to see the world through the eyes of the children, but we have to make a really big effort to try and wear these children's glasses, as Chris van der Hagen would say, put the children's glasses on to really see life through their eyes and really understand how they see sport, what they need from it. Now, we know from research that amongst many things, okay, and for example, Amanda Visek was identifying 81 determinants of fun yesterday, but we know that from a lot of research, what children like from sport or why they really enjoy doing sport comes down to normally 3 things, okay? They want to have fun, okay, and that's 81 different ways of understanding fun or contributors to fun. But they want to be with their friends. That's a big motivation for a lot of children. And they want to learn something. So fun, friends, and learning. Those 3 things really matter to children. So it's, again, as we are developing our programs or our sessions, how much are we thinking about, how much do we consider, how fun are we making it? How much are we focusing on learning? And how much are we focusing on the social aspects of the sport? Okay, so understanding children from that perspective. Now, I'm going to give you an example. This is all the videos I'm going to show you today are from real practices, real training sessions with a variety of children. In this case, it's a bunch of 8 and 9-year-old mini basketball players, and we're looking for elements of socialization and fun. So what do? Balloons, okay? Make it a party. So let's have a look at that video for a second. There we go. Okay, so we're working on a lot of things there. We are asking them to dribble the ball, but at the same time, they have to keep the balloons in the air. So you can see from their faces that they're really enjoying it. They're getting into it, okay? Keep dribbling, please, keep dribbling. You would be forgiven for thinking that that's something that only applies to 8 and 9-year-olds. But what happens if we do something similar, in this case, a balloon relay race with a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds? Pretty much the same. Go! So again, this is just a little warm-up. Incidentally, that Luca that was cheating is my own son. Okay. So remember, okay, be child-centered, make an effort to see the world through their eyes, and if you can't, ask them, okay? Laura Lundy yesterday, the voice of the child, make sure that you constantly ask them. We run Google Forms sometimes just like Post-it notes sometimes, but we're constantly asking the kids what they like and what they dislike from our sessions, okay? And we try to adjust, and we also give them a chance, for example, to develop their own sessions, to do their own drills, and to coach themselves sometimes, okay? Okay, so point number 2, be holistic. Now, being holistic is about really focusing much more than the athlete, seeing them as a person first, and a person is made out of, you know, to simplify it, we simplify this into 4 areas, okay? The social side, the physical side, the emotional, and the cognitive, okay? Sometimes the social, normally we can see the physical quite well because it's in front of your eyes, okay? We can see what children are like from a physical point of view, but we sometimes don't see too much the social, cognitive, and emotional side, and we don't pay enough attention to it, but also we don't create activities or situations where those 3 areas get to develop. And we normally think about the physical and the technical stuff, but we have to find situations where we can develop them holistically. So some examples. We want to build, for example, in our basketball club, a sense of appreciation for the club and for the opportunities that the club provides, and also a sense of responsibility to keep the club as it is and to improve the club, okay? So we get them tidying up the basketball center, cleaning up the club, okay? So you can see them there. The children and their families are cleaning the basketball center, and that makes a big impact on them realizing how important it is. And it obviously it develops another side to them. Now, in order to develop again this social side and this responsibility side, you're going to see a 15-year-old here coaching a bunch of 9 and 10-year-olds. And that happens regularly at the club, where always the older players come in to help when you're coaching the younger players. And we know that goes a long way. The younger players really like that, and the older players also get a lot from it. Okay. So 3, be inclusive. Okay. Now that can mean a lot of things, okay? For today, we're going to focus on the idea of being inclusive, creating sessions and programs where everyone is welcome and where everyone attending those sessions can go away having had fun, having had learned something, and having made friends, okay? Now, for example, in terms of learning, a great model that I'd like to introduce you to today is the inclusion spectrum, okay? Developed by Ken Black and Pamela Stevenson. Please go and have a look at this model. But it's just really giving you some great ideas as to how to create sessions where children can be in the same group, but perhaps doing different activities or modifying certain activities. So in the end, everybody has a chance to go away with some learning and a sense of fun and achievement. And an example of how we do that, for example, in this basketball session that we got for 9 and 10-year-olds on a Friday night, we have like two groups in one group, a group of more experienced players and a group of less experienced players. The less experienced players need more support. So at some point we separate them from the more experienced, and we have the coaches provide the support as the games go on. So you can see how the coach is there supporting them, and we make them go 3-on-3, so they've got many more opportunities to get a touch of the ball, and the coach can then direct where the ball goes a little bit more to give everybody an opportunity. So in this case, the coach is the mediator of the learning a little bit. Okay. Number 4, okay, make it fun and safe. Okay, we said before that fun is central to children enjoying sport. Okay, but also the safety element is fundamental. We know that when the brain feels threatened, when we feel that there is a threat, a danger to our life, and that could be an emotional threat or a physical threat, our capacity to learn closes. Okay, so we have to make sure that the environment that we create, the motivational climate, how do we treat people, what kind of relationships we build, how do we behave in front of the children, what kind of tone we use, is super important to create that safe environment where children can learn and have fun. There is even a more important point here around creating the safeguards that are going to make sure that no child comes to any harm during the sport activities. And we know that could be just from the point of view of a traditional risk assessment, where we are trying to make sure that the facility is fit for purpose. But also we know that we have to protect children from adults, really, and from other children, in terms of, we know, unfortunately, there is a lot of cases of abuse that we have to be proactive in supporting or in protecting children against. And Anne Tibas spoke at length about this yesterday. But if we follow on with the idea of just the fun, the sheer fun, and Amanda talked a lot about this yesterday, just some key examples of things that kill the fun. Okay, when we talk too long, when we make children wait in long lines, or when we make them just repeat an activity mindlessly for minutes and minutes and minutes. Okay, at the same time, we know that some things can make things quite fun. So playground games, giving drills and activities funny names, building stories around the activities, or having some fun competitions. These are all things, as you know, that can increase the fun in what we do. And that's really important if we want to keep children coming to sport. Number 5, prioritize the love for sport over learning sport. And Phil, who's going to come on after me, mentioned before in the chat that this was an important quote. Or maybe it was Thiago, I'm not sure now. But really, this is about making sure that we don't focus so much on the learning that we take over from the fun, but that we take away from the fun. That we teach in a way that what we're trying to do is really, if we want them to learn, first they have to fall in love with the activity. Again, we know from neuroscience that we learn much quicker those things that we are fascinated by, that we love. Okay, so really, let's go out there and focus on creating that love for the sport, and then we can think about the learning. For example, traditional pedagogies in sport, traditional ways of teaching or coaching have been around the idea of doing drills and being very repetitive and being very deliberate about the learning and doing activities that are very regimented. And we know that that can be boring for children. We're not saying don't do any of that, okay? But have a good balance between that and activities that are much more game-based, much more about playful learning, variable activities that are unpredictable and you know, that tend to be more fun. So, for example, like I say, I don't mean don't do any of the others, okay? Don't do any of the drills. I actually like to mix them up. So in this game that you're going to see now, on the way up is a more traditional drill, going through cones with the basketball. On the way back is a much more game-based scenario. So you can combine them and get the best of both worlds, because both types are really interesting. So they're practicing the ball handling on the way up. And then it's a more live situation on the way back, having to actually beat defenders on the way back. So you can mix them up. All right. Number 6, focus on foundational skills. Again, particularly with younger children, we tend to see coaches that are focusing so much on their own sport that sometimes we forget that actually there is a foundation of movement skills and tactical skills, or play skill as we call them, that really go together to develop the sport specific skills. So in the movement skills, stability, object control, locomotion. In the play skills, the idea of spacing, timing, tracking, anticipating, things that are important to every sport, and that therefore we have to try and build a foundation of those. And you can do those in a fun way, or in a dry way. Okay, so in this case, you're going to see a relatively dry way, but can be used as a warm up to build their movement skills, so they can move safely and efficiently. Okay, so there's a number of stations here as part of a basketball warm up. Okay, and you see there are 6 different stations working on 6 different types of movement. And now you're going to see a couple of children working on movement skills, but also tactical skills in terms of tracking another player, for example, in a very playful game. So one is trying to tag the other, and they have to track each other's movements while dribbling the basketball and moving sideways.
3, 2, 1, start!
All right. So you can combine these things. Now, number 7, my favorite, engage parents positively. Okay, we have to go away from this idea of the parents being a bit like in the Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. Okay, the coach on one side, the parent on the other, fighting all the time, and actually realize that both have the same goal, which is do whatever is best for the child. Okay, so we have to engage them, and what we've tried really, and very successfully, I have to say, is to be very proactive in our communication with parents. So we bring them together for workshops, and now we have to do these online, unfortunately. But look, it really is about being proactive, and providing parents with an opportunity to ask questions, with a bit of an education around what it means to take part in sport, particularly if their kids are playing sport at a high level, like it is our case. But also we want to bring the parents into the fun. Okay, so let's organize sessions where the parents and the kids can come together. Okay, so we have parent and child sessions sometimes where we can work together. And we also recruit them into coaching. So that's one of our last themes for a couple of years. And 4 of those coaches, well, for the 4 assistant coaches, 3 of them were parents that we recruited into the club, from the sideline into coaching. And the other one was a primary school teacher that used to be also a player at the club. Okay, so always find ways to include the parents. Number 8, plan progressive programs. Really, really important that we need to understand that we can't really teach them everything in one go, and that we have to give time for the bananas to mature. Okay, so if we are coaching a green banana, we have to do something very different to what we're doing with a yellow banana or a very mature banana. Okay, so really take, as Malcolm Brown said yesterday, be patient and take your time and let the bananas mature slowly but surely, and plan for that development. Okay, don't be too ad hoc. Really plan for the development. And in my case, for example, I've got a very clear idea of, as we go through the ages, what I want to coach as they get older. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do at the club, that we build progressively from one age group to the next, rather than trying to teach them everything in one go. Number 9, use different methods to enhance learning. A little bit related to what we said earlier about mixing the drill-based approach with the games-based approach, but we like to take it even a bit further. Because now we talked about, okay, so there's that kind of debate between drills and games, but also there's a lot of other opportunities where children can learn. And 2 that we are exploring a lot is the idea of peer coaching and self-coaching. So we really want to put a lot of responsibility on children as they get older, to be able to coach themselves either individually or as a team, but also to coach each other. And I'm just going to play you a quick example of activities that we do to encourage that. Just watch them coaching themselves. You'll be amazed at how good children are at coaching themselves. If you give them a little bit of responsibility, you'll see how good they are, how much they actually enjoy taking that responsibility and making it work. If you've never tried it, please do try it. We even now, we don't do pre-game talks, team talks, they do them themselves. And even at times in the middle of timeout, we let them take the timeout and really encourage their responsibility and their own thinking. And finally, the idea of using competition in a developmental way. Well, competition is neither good nor bad. Okay, it's all about the format and the management and how we present that competition to the children and how well that competition fits the developmental stage of the child. Okay, and in that sense, we really would encourage you to try different formats to see what fits your children best. Now, one thing that we really know is that whereas old people like being on benches, young people don't. So whatever form of competition, make sure that it maximizes the amount of time children get to play. And that way they will be much happier and they will make a return to sport all the time. So that's everything. I hope you really think through the 10 points of the pledge and give us your thoughts in the chat, and I'll see you. I'll see what questions you have. Thank you.
Sergio, thank you so much for your, well, first of all, leading by example and helping us to understand how we can bring the ICOACHKIDS pledge to life. For the audience, we have some time for questions, so keep them coming in, but I'll start by asking a few. The first in the chat comes from Guillermo, who has asked, how do you keep yourself in check to guarantee that you live the pledge? And how explicit are the 10 elements of the pledge in your own planning?
That's a great question. The main, you have to just go back to the 10 points every now and again. And thankfully, I think in my case, because together with some other people, we wrote the 10 points, they're quite present in my mind all the time, okay? But you really, the point about the planning is central. It is really important to actually, while you're planning your sessions, because the danger is always that we feel that, again, because this idea of sport being magic, that all these things are going to happen, but actually planning for them to happen is really important, okay? You might be a really nice person and your sport might be the best sport in the world, but you really have to plan for some of these other things to happen, or otherwise they won't happen, or you won't be guaranteed that they're going to happen, okay? So definitely spending time in the planning, thinking how you're going to make it happen is really important.
And I guess as well as waiting for the players to ripen as bananas, as you have alluded to quite nicely, I guess, is there an element of patience from the coach to help to, as they start to implement these ideas, to start them really coming through, not only in your practice, but also with those values being embedded with the groups that you have?
Yeah, and for me, one thing that we always say, like when you look at the 10 items of the pledge, okay, when you put them all together, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it's like a spinning plates, and you have to do all these things, and if that plate falls, the other one, and I would just say, look at the 10 elements of the pledge and do a bit of a self-assessment, if you will. Where are you doing really well already? Because I'm sure that you'll be doing very well in many of them, okay? and then pick one that you think you want to make a difference over the next couple of weeks, and then give it a try and see what happens. And when you are done with that one, then take another one. Don't try and make it all happen at once, because that will be very, very painful.
And I guess that's hard for the coach on their own. And Zoran has asked a brilliant question, asking, how do you go about encouraging the other coaches within your group, within your team, to also take on, embody, and practice these 10 core rules?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because you're not gonna win this battle on your own. If you want, you're gonna have to. We always go back to the idea of communication. And that can be very explicit, where you actually sit down and have a conversation around the pledge and or certain items of the pledge, or it might be more a bit of a, if you want, guerrilla warfare, where you're gonna lead by example, and then sort of ask them, what do you think about what I did there today? So, for example, when I started doing when I started really going all out on this self-coaching, and giving kids a chance to, in the middle of a session, just coach themselves or call a timeout and just take time for themselves. I started asking my fellow coaches, how do you think that's working? Do you think they enjoy doing that? What do you think they get from it? Okay. So you can do it in two ways. You can be very explicit, or you can do something and then ask for the opinion. Do you think that's a good idea? What do you think they're getting from that? Yeah.
And I guess we've had a question from Richard as well. Obviously, these 10 golden rules were born out of a literature review, 4 years ago now, quite some time. Are these rules set in stone? Do you see these evolving over time? Do you see any new rules coming in based on your experiences over the past 5 years?
That is a really, really good question, and something that sometimes keeps me awake at night. I do think that the rules will evolve. I think that although these 10, as they currently stand, provide a really good starting point for anyone wanting to go in this direction, it will come to a point where we have to reassess and see. I think the 10 will still stand, but whether we can shape them in a different way, or whether we can add or bring new things into them, for sure, it's something that it is the pledge is a life document, if you want. It's something that will constantly evolve.
And we've heard a lot over the past 2 days about the importance of fun and the importance of the children being heard. It was 81 different variables of fun that Amanda shared with us yesterday. We've had a question in the chat asking, what are your top tips for creating fun learning environments?
Yeah, well, I mean, after what Amanda presented last night, I'm going to be very careful here, because obviously fun can be interpreted or promoted in very different ways. Okay. At a very basic level, fun is something that is inherently, inherently enjoyable. Okay, something that we do because we like doing it, and because without having to think whether there's any personal gain in it or not. Okay, so at that level, I'd say playfulness is a fantastic element of fun. So can you think of anything that you currently do that you don't think your players or your athletes particularly enjoy doing, and whether there is a way to transform that activity so the goals, the objectives are still the same, but the way to get to them is a bit more playful. Is that possible? So, for example, the video that I showed, I really want my young players to really develop good ball handling skills. But if all I do is have them go through cones, they're not coming back next week. Now, my solution to that was, okay, can I create a number of activities where, on the one hand, they are doing, they first do the activity dry and then go into a live or semi-live element. So bringing that playfulness there is really important. And for me, the second bit about fun goes back to something that Roberto Martinez said yesterday: relationships. Right? If your individual relationship with that child is positive, And if the relationship between all the children is positive, whatever you do, it will be perceived as fun because it forms part of a social environment where they all feel connected. So to me, that's another way of, if you want, getting away with less fun activities because they are done in an environment that is seen by them as safe and social.
Sergio, thank you so much for your insights. That's all the time we have for questions, but I know you'll be sticking with us for a little longer. So please feel free to head over the chat and Q&A to answer some of the outstanding questions that we have. Thank you to both you and the ICOACHKIDS founding members for all of the work that you do in putting kids first in sport and continuing to bring these 10 golden rules to life.
Thank you.
Now for our next guest. We have Phil Kearney, who is the course leader for the MSc Applied Sports Coaching at the University of Limerick in the Republic of Ireland. He received his PhD from the University of Limerick in 2009, and he then taught at the University of Chichester from 2009 to 2017, where he was Programme Coordinator for the BSc Sports Science and Coaching. Phil then returned to the University of Limerick in 2017. A Fellow of the Higher Education Authority, Phil's research and teaching focus is on skill acquisition and youth sport, particularly in the context of track and field athletics. He's also the co-founder of Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland. Phil, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome to the 5th Annual ICOACHKIDS Conference.
Thanks very much, Gary. Delighted to be here with you this evening. So, as we think about the future of youth sport, it's really important that we ground ourselves in what we've learned from the research. And what I'm going to try and do over the next 15 minutes or so is share some lessons about the research in youth sport that can guide coaches, clubs, organizations as they try to make positive changes in youth sport. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the numerous colleagues, collaborators, postgraduate students, and partner organizations which have contributed to the research that I'm going to present over the coming slides. When I first heard the theme for the conference about the future of youth sport, I thought of this song from Bob Dylan, and you'll see a number of lines from that song several times through the presentation. It's really nice to see from the rugby in the west coast of Ireland all the way to cricket in Australia, organizations are making changes to the structure of youth sport. And ICOACHKIDS is really contributing to guide those changes. And it's not just organizations that are making changes. Professor Lundy in the opening talk last night gave the example of Salisbury Rovers. And for me, this is an ideal example because not only are they taking the initiative and making changes to enhance the quality of the youth sport experience, but they're also documenting what they are doing and why they are doing it so that any club can see the example and can experiment with what they're doing within their own context. So if we are going to talk about change and making change in youth sport, it is really important that we're guided by the research. And so I'm going to focus on 3 lessons from the research that I think are fundamental to underpin any changes that are made in terms of how we structure competition or how we enhance coach development or any other changes that we want to make to youth sport. My research into youth sport began with a conversation with a parent. His daughter was 11 years old and had just been very successful in a number of regional competitions. And he wanted to do what was best for his daughter. He wanted to see if he could enhance this gift that she seemed to have for athletics. He wondered whether maybe she should do a couple of extra training sessions per week, maybe some one-to-one work with a coach in addition to the normal club sessions. Should she maybe leave one of the other sports that she wasn't as keen on to really focus on athletics. His motivation was to do the best for his child, but it was his understanding of what success means in youth sport, especially success at such a young age, and how much we can read into that was lacking. So from that conversation, I began a research program looking at 11 years of athletics results and hundreds of thousands of performances. And I'm going to show you one of my favorite graphs from that program of research. So what you can see will be a series of dots. Each dot represents one athlete. Here it comes from the girls' 100-meter results from the United Kingdom. On the horizontal axis, you can see how highly they were ranked at under 13, so 12 years of age. The lower, the better. And then on the vertical axis, you can see their ranking when they were 14 years of age. Now, if there's a relationship between someone's performance at age 12 and their performance at age 14, then the dots are going to cluster around a diagonal line, starting in the bottom left and running up towards the top right of the graph. But that's not what we see. We actually don't see a pattern of results here. We see that the performance at age 12 really doesn't bear any relationship with how highly ranked a child is at age 15, or at age 14 rather. Now, you might think this is the top 200. So, I'm focused on the top end where it's very competitive and it might be changing all the time, but we can zoom out a little bit and we see the same absence of a relationship between how well someone performs at 12 years of age and how well they perform at 14. So I think back to Malcolm Brown's Q&A yesterday, when he emphasized how difficult it is to predict the performance of an athlete a year in advance, and the importance of being as open and as inclusive as possible with the opportunities that we offer for athletes for as long as possible through their development. Now, my research is focused on athletics and track and field athletics first and foremost, but there's a wealth of data across tennis, football, volleyball, judo, swimming, all showing a similar pattern of results. Going back to Bob Dylan, the first one now will later be last. We do not see a strong relationship between performances in late childhood, early adolescence, and 2 years' time, never mind 10 years' time. Now, why is it that we don't see these, or we see such a weak relationship? So our initial research following up this had a look at relative age of participants. Approximately the same number of children are born in each quarter of the year. But for youth sport, there's normally a cutoff date. And what we find when we look at, in this case, all the athletes who achieved the minimum standard to be nationally ranked, if you look at the graph on the top right, we see all the athletes show a different distribution in terms of an overrepresentation of athletes born in the first quarter of the year and an underrepresentation of those athletes born later in the year. And if we narrow our focus down to just those athletes performing at the very highest level, top 20 in the rankings, we see it becomes even more exaggerated. So the athletes who are winning the medals in early adolescence are not the athletes who are training the hardest, and they're not the athletes who have the most potential for the future. They're the relatively oldest. And the athletes with a little bit more growing, maybe a little bit more experience, a little bit more interaction with coaches, this complex mix of factors that comes together with relative age. Now, hopefully, there are lots of people in the audience listening to this and thinking, well, we know that. This is nothing new. And I really wanted to get to the stage where relative age is nothing new. Coaches are not just aware of relative age effects, but also have a wealth of strategies for addressing these relative age effects. But unfortunately, in other research that we've done, we found that only about 50% of parents and coaches actually were aware of relative age effects, and even fewer were able to talk about strategies that could be used in order to address this. So we'll keep talking about it until that awareness number starts to go up. More recently, and led by Fionn Fitzgerald from Munster Technological University in Tralee, we've moved away from relative age and started focusing more on maturation. In any typical group of 14-year-olds, some will be ahead of schedule in their development, and others will be behind schedule. The research is really clear. The advantages of maturation are large, but temporary. We need to understand that maturation levels of athletes in order to be able to provide the suitable experience to all individuals in youth sport. If anyone is interested in fitness development and athletic development in general in youth athletes, I really recommend taking a look at the athletic skills model. But one of the extra elements that they add, which you can find on their website here, is information on how to calculate or estimate the maturation status of young athletes. And that can be really useful for parents, for coaches, in terms of giving them guidance, both in terms of participation, but also in terms of injury risks as well. For anyone interested in finding out more about maturation, I really think this is one of the most important topics for youth coaches to understand. There's a wonderful ICOACHKIDS short video linked here featuring Joe Eisenman and Sean Cumming. One of the reasons that we're interested in maturation in particular is that more mature individuals typically play more time, more minutes, more games. Patrick McAvoy has been doing some research over the last couple of years looking at rugby and looking at the relationship between playing games, number of appearances that a young person has, and their retention in the sport. Patrick has looked at over 30,000 player records, and this is the pattern that we see. The more games that individuals play, the higher the likelihood that they return to the sport 1 and 2 years down the line. In fact, at every age grade that he has examined, we see that individuals who return 1 and 2 years later have more appearances than individuals who have dropped out of the sport. So, more time playing, more time staying in the sport. And that's the same finding that we have from Ben Jones and colleagues when they investigated the half-game rule in English rugby. The half-game rule requires all children within certain age grades to play at least half of every game. Now, what's really important to stress here is that the half-game rule doesn't solve all the problems. It gives coaches a different set of challenges to solve. But what I think England Rugby have done really well, and you can find this link at the website or through the QR code, is they've highlighted what these new challenges might be, and they've also proposed a series of solutions for coaches to help them when they make these changes to develop youth sport to overcome the challenges that will inevitably come, the different challenges, but ones that we certainly can solve more easily than the challenges we currently face. So, I focused on 3 lessons from the data. There is no doubting that there's a weak relationship between youth and later success. There is no doubting that early maturing children have quite a large but a temporary advantage in youth sport, and the more children play, the more they stay. And so I've posed here a series of questions. These are questions for coaches, questions for clubs, questions for organizations as a whole to consider. Because I think it's really important that we think about what changes we want to make within youth sport and how is it that we are going to, like Salisbury Rovers at the level of an individual club, or like Connacht Rugby, Australian cricket at the level of organizations, take the initiative, lend your hand, and make changes to enhance the quality of the youth sport experience. Because it's a really inspiring place to be at the moment, that there are so many opportunities to shape youth sport in a really positive direction. And if though there are individuals listening in and they're looking for resources to help them further in terms of how do we go about making these changes? How do we go about enhancing the quality of youth sport? What small changes can I make as an individual coach? Can we make as a club? Can we make as an organization? I recommend these two resources: Redesigning Youth Sport as a whole series of case studies of other clubs and organizations that have taken these steps and documented a process that can help you to do that, and the ICOACHKIDS pledge that we've just heard about. Because following the pledge and assessing what you do in relation to the pledge is a fantastic guide to enhance the quality of the youth sport experience. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll have some time for some questions.
Wow, £1 in the pot yesterday, £1 in the pot today for muting. Sorry, Phil, but we certainly do have time for questions. And what a fantastic message that you shared there in saying that youth sport is a really inspiring place to be. And again, just re-emphasising the courage shown by youth sport in the past few years and the optimism that we have moving forwards. Our first question, Phil, is from Sheila, who has asked if you could make only one change in youth sport, which all governing bodies had to implement, what would it be?
Wow. That's a fantastic question. And that's a fantastic question. And there's so many things that you would like to engage with through that. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to be selfish, and I don't think I could possibly narrow it down to one. I think this is the case. So I'm not criticizing governing bodies here. I think this is the case, but I don't think they promote it enough. I think that there is really fantastic practice already happening with individual clubs and coaches. I think they have the capacity to do innovative things. Many of them are doing innovative things. I think what I'd like to see is more of those innovative stories getting shared and promoted. So I think that's the change. I think the change, the experimentation is happening. I think what would really benefit is sharing more of those stories so that more clubs feel inspired and confident and assured to take the steps to do that as well. So I haven't narrowed it down, but I think that would be my number one.
I think that's fantastic insight, Phil, in terms of celebrating all of the great work that's going on, to inspire further innovation, to encourage coaches to feel that it is a safe space to try these things. We have time for one more question. From Aaron, who has asked, many national governing bodies seem to be focusing on providing underage academies, shall we call them? What would your approach be to structuring these, if at all?
So the end of the question is a really important one, if at all. So, I think there is certainly a place for enhanced development programs at some stage, but I think it's really important that clubs and sports think about, what's the optimal timing for this. And I think a really good way of looking at that, a really good starting point, which is some of the work that we're starting to do in Ireland at the moment with film that I mentioned earlier, is having a look to see, who are you capturing into these programs? Are you giving an opportunity to all children? Are you using your resources to provide the best opportunity to all children? Or are you starting to exclude lots of children quite early? So I think on the one hand, the timing of these is a really important question to think very carefully about, when is the right time to start to offer this? And secondly, there's some lovely work by Gary Williams and Anya McNamara looking at individuals who didn't make it in elite sport, but who learned tremendously from the process of being in some of these development squads. And I think actually that emphasis on, what experience can you give to all athletes coming through that enhances the quality not just of their sport, but of their life as a whole. I think the best academy programs, the best development squad programs, they offer that broader life development, and that's the bit I think I'd be really emphasizing.
Thanks, Phil. If you're sticking around with us this evening, there are still a couple of questions in the Q&A in the chat on the platform, so be sure to head over there. I know we've got some questions from people, including Zoltan, who'll be excited to hear your insights further. But for now, Phil, thank you again for another amazing presentation with ICOACHKIDS. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Gary.
It's now time for us to take a short interval. We will be back in 15 minutes. And during this break, you will see some more information about ICOACHKIDS and our resources, as we did last night. And after the break, we're joined by Paralympic high jumper Jordan Lee and Nicole Lavoie of the Tucker Centre for Research in Girls and Women's Sport. See you soon.
Hey coach, welcome back to ICOACHKIDS. In the previous videos, we looked at what coaches can do to promote the personal development of children through sport. There were lots of ideas and practical tips that we can use straight away. Now, as children grow and develop, what they want, what they need, and how we give it to them changes over time. We've said it multiple times that children are not mini adults, but a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old are also very different and need to be treated differently. If we don't, we risk them getting bored, getting injured, or even dropping out of sport altogether. To complicate things a bit more, children's development is influenced by what's called the 3 ages of sport: chronological age, biological age, and training age. Chronological age is the actual age of the child as per their date of birth. Biological age is the developmental age of the child based on their level of biological maturity. Now, research shows that children of the same biological age may be up to 3 or 4 years apart based on their rate of maturation. The kids on this picture are all the same chronological age, but they're clearly not the same biological age. Finally, training age is the number of years a child has been practicing a sport or activity. So two children could share the same chronological and biological age, yet be poles apart in terms of skill and understanding if one has trained substantially more. As coaches then, we should try to work out the current stage of development of each child based on the combination of the three different ages to adapt the way we coach them. This will be covered in a lot more detail in MOOC 2, but we would like to share with you at this point a simple model I developed a few years ago to help coaches work through these issues. It is called the SPEC model, and it looks at children developing from birth to full maturity in 4 different dimensions: social, physical, emotional, and cognitive. Yes, the model is going to give you 4D glasses so you see children in a more holistic way. It will also help you understand that 1. Children have to go through these stages and that there is no magic way to skip any of them. And 2. That your job is to pitch sessions and activities at the right level of demand in all 4 development areas, or you are setting yourself for disaster. Let's have a brief look at each of the 4 broad development dimensions. Let's start with physical development. Some key facts coaches need to know include: first, children grow at different rates from birth to full maturity, and this affects what they're capable of learning and doing, as well as their proneness to injury. Some of them, particularly girls, may have a growth spurt as puberty starts from as early as 11 years of age. What coaches need to know is that during periods of rapid growth, coordination may suffer as the brain adapts to the new proportions, and children may experience growing pains and be more susceptible to high impact or repetitive strain injuries. Second, children grow from the top down and from the center out. The implication for coaches is that children will be able to control body parts closer to the brain and to the midline earlier than those further away. Think about it this way: they will be better with their hands than with their feet, and better with the strength-based activities than dexterity-based ones. For instance, kicking for distance versus kicking for placement. And third, children's energy systems are not as developed as those of the adult. Their aerobic and anaerobic systems will not be working at full capacity until their teens. For coaches, it means that particularly young children should not be working for more than 5 to 20 seconds at a time, with equal recovery periods. They will progressively be able to engage in longer and more intense activities. What about the social development area? This is what coaches need to know. First, children start by being very self-centered and unable to share or work cooperatively. When given the chance, however, they progressively become more able to work in groups and actually enjoy it a lot. For you as a coach, this may mean being mindful that very young children may not be ready to work in groups or to complete tasks that require high amounts of cooperation or collaborative thinking. It may also mean that some kids may appear selfish and self-centered, but that doesn't mean that they are bad kids. It's just the way they are. Second, children do not always understand the difference between their performance and the team's. They don't really get that different players may have different roles either. And they also struggle to see that working together for a common purpose, even if this means sacrificing your own goals, is a desirable thing to do. Again, as a coach, don't get mad if a child appears selfish or disinterested in the group. Just help them understand until they get it. And third, children, like adults, tend to become close friends with some kids and not others. And they also form small friendship groups. As a coach, it is not so much about breaking up these groups, but about creating opportunities for them to interact with kids they don't spend a lot of time with regularly. Purposefully pairing kids with a non-close friend may lead to them getting to know each other a bit more and becoming closer. Okay, so now let's talk about the emotional development area. Some of the things coaches should be aware of include: first, young children may struggle to cope with disappointment or not getting their own way. Some may react throwing a tantrum, while others may look sad and withdrawn. As a coach, you can't expect every child to behave in the same way. Getting to know every child and speaking to the parents about the best ways to help them control their emotions will be very useful for you. Second, children can have little emotional self-awareness. This means they don't really realize the impact of their actions and behaviors. It also means that they may struggle to express emotions and feelings. And this again may lead to either tantrums or withdrawal. In the long run, a calming voice and repeated explanations of the impact of losing control tend to work much better than discipline. And third, most children don't really get delayed gratification. So this idea of if you work hard, we'll play games at the end may not really work. As a coach, while fostering the development of their delayed gratification capacity, you have to make sure there is sufficient immediate gratification for them to enjoy the sessions and keep coming back for more. And finally, let's explore the cognitive development area. First, coaches need to understand that children learn in multiple ways, by doing, by observing and emulating, by listening, etc. But coaches also need to know that at first, children will learn much more by doing and using trial and error than by observing and listening. For you as a coach, it means that the focus should be on giving kids a greater chance of doing and trying things and using simple demonstrations and explanations when required. Second, children's concentration span is short and their ability to process lots of information is not as well developed as in adolescents or adults. In other words, don't talk for too long, don't give complex or lengthy explanations, and don't keep them waiting in lines. If you do, there is a strong chance they will lose concentration, get bored, and start doing things you don't really want them to. And third, children also struggle to differentiate between cause and effect, and between an effort and ability. For this reason, they tend to think that if they try hard, they should get it right straight away. Failure may be difficult to cope with, and coaches have a big role to play in getting young players to understand that learning doesn't happen overnight. So, what does this all mean to you as a coach? Well, imagine the 4 dimensions as 4 related yet different journeys the kids have to make on their way to full maturity. There are a few consequences for coaches. First, if we want activities and full sessions and programs to work, these need to be pitched at the right level. But not only on the physical dimension, which is the more visible dimension out of the 4, on all of them. Children develop at different rates in all 4 areas. A child may have the physical ability to do something, but if either socially, emotionally, or cognitively the task is at the wrong level, they won't be able to do it, or do it consistently. We use something called the coaching zones to illustrate this point. As you can see in this figure, when we get it right and our activities and sessions are set right above the kids' current level of ability, the magic happens, and they enjoy themselves and learn a lot. We call that the learning zone. And that's where we want kids to be as much as possible in our sessions. Anything below that, we call the comfort zone, where learning may be consolidated and things feel safe, but if kids spend too long there, they quickly drop into the boredom zone. And as you know, nothing good happens there. At the other extreme, when we're asking kids to do something that is way above their current level of ability, we call it the panic zone. And in the panic zone, not much good happens. Kids either withdraw and fall into the boredom zone or freak out and never come back. The only good use of the panic zone may be when we want children to experience a little bit of difficulty and hardship to see if they manage to bring themselves back to an emotional state where learning can happen. Now, this has to be done in a very skillful and controlled way, as it can quickly escalate and get out of control. The second implication for coaches of the multidimensional nature of children is that there is bound to be different levels of development between all the children in your team. And in all 4 areas, this makes providing suitable activities for everyone in your session a challenging proposition, yet one that is worth working for. Running differentiated sessions takes a bit of planning and skill, but it is very, very important. We will deal with this in MOOCs 2 and 3. Okay, so now you understand a bit more about how children grow and develop and what it means for you as a coach. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to the 5th annual ICOACHKIDS conference. It's time for our next guest, who will be interviewed this evening. 21-year-old Killarney native Jordan Lee was born with one hand, but that hasn't stopped him from pursuing his sporting dreams. Having been born with amniotic band syndrome, he has navigated his way through life without a left forearm. Breaking down barriers, Jordan is a European medalist in the sport of high jump in para-athletics and is also a national medalist in able-bodied athletics. He is one of Ireland's Tokyo 2020 Olympians, leading out his country as the flag bearer going into the Olympic Stadium. Jordan also has excelled in the sport of basketball, having played at international level as a youth, and he is the first one-handed basketball player to ever represent their country nationally in the world. To interview Jordan about his personal experiences of being a young Paralympic and Olympic athlete, we have ICOACHKIDS founding member Declan O'Leary of Sport Ireland Coaching. Hi Declan, hi Jordan.
Hi Gary, thanks for that introduction.
Thank you very much.
Both myself and Jordan. As I introduce Jordan, I'd just like to thank for the opportunity and thank Jordan for coming to be interviewed. Jordan is going to talk about his story or his journey, and I think it's worth recollection that each individual child will have their story over time about their involvement in sport. Could I ask you two, the viewers, to maybe use the theme of this evening, the ICOACHKIDS pledge, to hear Jordan's story and to identify which of the 10 rules you feel are picked up within Jordan's story. It's just a way of keeping you focused on what's happening. So Jordan, welcome. You haven't always been a Paralympian, and I think it was mentioned earlier that only 1% of participants in sport, or less than 1%, make it into high performance sport. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in sport?
Yes, certainly. I'd first of all just like to start off by saying thanks very much to the entire team and ICOACHKIDS for having me involved. Hopefully the people listening and viewing this conversation can learn a thing or two from our discussion and enjoy the topic. I've been involved from sport ever since I was 4 years old. The first sport that I showed any real interest or desire in happened to be the sport of basketball. Main reason being that my dad was actually a National League player for the local team in Killarney in County Kerry, which is where I'm originally from. So I was always around that basketball background. So I was only destined and bound for myself at one stage to actually pick up a basketball and learn how to play properly. And I actually remember my first basketball training session like it was just yesterday, to tell you the truth. I remember being in the car on the way to the training venue, exceptionally excited about what was going to happen. And I remember walking into the basketball court with my dad, and it was actually like a scene from a movie. where everybody just looked at me. They saw my hand, they saw my disability. It was as if the basketball suddenly stopped bouncing for a moment, and you could see the curiosity run throughout the entire room with the kids and the coaches that were there. And as a 5-year-old, as you can imagine, you can take that either one way and use it as fuel, or you can use it in another way and go down another route where you can be disappointed with the reaction that I had just received. And I decided to go with route number one, and that was to use it as fuel. And 9 short years later, after my first ever basketball training session, I became the first one-handed basketball player to ever represent their country nationally in the world, which is an achievement that I still look back on to this day with great pride.
And rightly so. That was really interesting, Jordan. You mentioned about using the reaction that you encountered as fuel. Was there other things in that environment that contributed to make it a positive experience?
Definitely. When I say and use the word curiosity, I think that is a fair enough word to say that, you know, because of the sport of basketball is predominantly a two-handed sport, everybody is rightly going to be curious to see how this new one-handed basketball player was going to go on and about, and how he was going to adapt his own way of playing in the sport of basketball. But I have to say, the coaches that I've had growing up throughout my life, not just in basketball but in sport in general, have always been exceptionally accommodating. And I think basketball in particular is a very good sport where it doesn't matter if you happen to have one hand, two hands, three hands, doesn't matter what your disability is. Everybody has their own unique way of doing things. And my own unique way of doing something just happened as well to be that I actually had one hand as well on top of it. Because every basketball player, when they play on the court, they have their own different way of shooting the ball. And just because I had one hand didn't make it any bit different. It was just my own unique way that was different to me. And everybody was the same, and everybody was in the same boat in that context. So I just adapted my own way. My coaches were very supportive. They had me doing the simple, basic things right. And then if there was any tricky drills, we would be a bit creative with that, because just because there's a small barrier that is in your way doesn't mean that you can't get over that barrier. You know, you just have to be that little bit creative. You need to be adapted towards the situation at hand, and you will eventually find your own unique way of doing it.
That's absolutely, and every individual will have their unique way of doing it.
Definitely.
Be one, as you say, be one, two, or three-handed. You mentioned your coaches there being supportive, and you identified the coaching skill of adapting activities to make you inclusive. Were there any other qualities that they used or things they did to make you feel welcome and make you feel included?
Definitely, 100%. And I think even more so over the past couple of years, as I transitioned into Paralympic sport, is when I really started to understand the logistics of what it actually takes to be a really good, accommodating coach. And my own personal coach, from a high jump perspective, is a guy by the name of Tomas Griffin. He's a local Killarney Kerry man. And his qualities of coaching are, you know, exceptionally high, where he's very adaptable. He listens to the athlete. He listens to myself in a way where if something isn't exactly going to plan, then he's very open to trying new things and being creative with certain exercises, let's say hypothetically in the gym, that I would still get a good benefit from. For example, even throughout the first and second lockdown, we were being creative from an S&C point of view, where I was actually being able to deadlift with one hand with the use of a seatbelt safety strap on the other side of the bar. So, you know, like I said earlier on in the chat a couple of minutes ago, just because there's a barrier in your way, or just because it seems like something is impossible to do, that isn't the case, because there is always a way around it. Everybody has their own unique way of doing things that you will still be able to get a benefit from. Not everybody does something the same way. And I think Tomas is a very good guy with understanding that. And not everything needs to be exceptionally creative then too. Some things certain athletes respond well to anyway. So yes, I am an athlete with a disability, but athletes respond differently to different training methods and different training cues anyway. So that just happened to be an exercise that of an example that suited me.
Absolutely, and you mentioned the athlete's voice in there as well, and you've been part of the team around your development. Could you go back a step and just speak about what presented you with the opportunity to transition from basketball to high jump?
Definitely. It's quite an interesting story. So I'll try to keep it short and sweet and not go too off topic. But for fifth and sixth year of secondary school, I decided to do a course called Leaving Cert Applied, which is a different route than the typical Leaving Cert. And part of this Leaving Cert requires you to find a work experience. And for fifth and sixth year, I decided to do my work experience in the Carver Centre, which they actually have a headquarters in Tralee in County Kerry. They're an organisation that help people with disabilities through physical activity and sport. And they actually already knew who I was through my basketball background and encouraged me to get involved with the organisation. They welcomed me in with open arms, and they actually wanted to create a video of myself displaying my achievements to date in my basketball career that they were going to highlight at the National Seminar for Inclusion that was on in December of 2016, I believe. And one of the guest speakers at the event was Jason Smith, who is also known as the fastest Paralympian of all time, second fastest man in Irish history, able-bodied or disabled. So a real fantastic athlete. And he encouraged me to go to a Paralympic Expo that was going to be on the following month in January of 2017, basically a trial and fun day to see if you had any interest or any potential in any of the sports that were available. And in my own words, in my pure Kerry accent, I said, sure, look, I'll go for the crack and I'll see what it's like. And I remember going up the following month with 4 different sports, seeing serious potential in me to take on their discipline at a professional level. So I then had to make a decision, because I was still playing basketball at that stage, that first of all, whether I wanted to try a new sport, and second of all, if I did, what sport was that going to be? So I decided with some good thought and consideration that I'd go with the high jump, as it'd probably be the sport I'd enjoy the most and also be the sport that I'd be best at. So that's where things initially started with my transition into Paralympic sport.
That's really interesting, and just that role model that Jason is to help you spark that transition into athletics, and you then deciding which discipline you wanted to pursue. You mentioned your coach Tomas earlier. You've taken part in the Paralympics in Tokyo, and congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
What are yours and Thomas's future aims moving forward?
Definitely. I suppose every athlete has different aspirations and goals that they want to achieve, but my mentality is one that is never sort of satisfied with what I achieve, but in a positive way. I've always said it from a very young age when I initially started off in the sport that I wanted to be the best high jumper in the world. And that's something that I still believe can be done and still can be achieved. And it's something that I believe that I'll be able to jump over that barrier, which, I ultimately do on an everyday basis anyway, considering the nature of my sport. So myself and Tomas' aims and ambitions over the next couple of years is to, obviously progressively get better, set out short-term goals that we hope to reach and achieve, build on those short-term goals towards our long-term goals of qualifying for major championships consistently, getting to Paris for the Paralympic Games there. But my main goal is to reach my prime for 2028. That's where I hope to be at my best. And even a goal aside from sport is to continuing to keep on inspiring people, people of all abilities, because seeing is believing at the end of the day. I didn't exactly have another one-handed person, you could say, to look up to growing up. And the amount of people and families and kids who have actually reached out to me saying that I'm their hero and that they have the exact same hand as me, especially on the lead up to Tokyo, has been, it's been phenomenal. And I think realistically, that's probably my greatest achievement and something I'm happiest with, is being able to inspire these people.
That's fantastic, Jordan. Well done. And just, you mentioned others with a disability taking part in sport. In your opinion, how can we make sport more inclusive? What should we do? And what is the role of coaches in that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think there's multiple ways of answering that. But I think something, and it's actually a very simple way, is the power of social media nowadays. Because how I got involved in Paralympic sport, going back to the proper roots of the whole journey and story, is that I spotted Cara and I saw Cara through social media. So if I never spotted Cara and the fantastic stuff that they're doing and things that they're promoting, I never would have met the guys in Cara, and ultimately I never would have led to me wanting to take part in Paralympic sport and meeting Jason Smith and meeting all these fantastic people along the way. And I think that's something that people in clubs and communities could use to their advantage in promoting social media, making sure their coaches are open and that they aren't anxious to welcoming people of all abilities into their club, because there is a way of doing things. And just because that way is different for me or different for you or different for somebody else, we still all reach our end goals in different ways. And I think it's just important to highlight that and making sure that coaches are open to that process.
That's a real good point, Jason. I think if people of all abilities can take part in their local sport, in their local sports, in their community, in their local clubs, in their community, the gatekeeper may very well be the coach who provides those opportunities. And I think using the qualities and skills that you mentioned earlier of being adaptable, listening to the athletes, and then making the environment welcoming and inclusive can have everybody taking part. So well done. Thank you so much for the interview. I think there may very well be some questions from that Gary might pose, but could I thank you for your contribution and wish you well in your future career. So
no problem at all. Thanks for having me, guys.
Jordan, back to you, Gary.
Jordan, thank you so much for the insights into your experiences. I, for one, will certainly be cheering on Team Ireland in the next couple of games when it comes to high jump for certain. I'm really excited to see what you do next. And we have time for one or two questions. And the first one that has come from Phil has asked, are there any lessons that you learned in playing team sports, such as basketball, that have really helped you in your individual sport career as a high jumper?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thanks for that. Very interesting way that I could answer this, where I think playing in team sports really builds up resilience, because I found that in my later years of playing basketball and playing in team sports, I used to play in multiple different sports. So I played in soccer. I used to play a bit of Gaelic football then as well, our national sport here in Ireland. So I was always around a team sporting environment before I got involved in individual sport, which is high jump. And I found that I was able to build up quite a bit of resilience from initially starting off in team sport, people sort of doubting my ability, mainly my teammates, growing up, and ultimately proving them wrong with exceptional amount of hard work and dedication, getting up early before school to go shooting basketball and to go swimming with my dad, just having the resilience to sort of prove those doubters wrong. And that, I think that's something that has really helped me to this day, even in individual sport and in life in general, because it kind of forced me to have that work ethic playing alongside other people and having teammates in that perspective. So.
Jordan, thank you so much. And I love that insight there in terms of the resilience to get up early in the morning. I'm sure there's audience members with us today with teenage children who wish they were so lucky as to have their kids wake up on time, let alone early. But thank you for all of your insights today. I'm so excited to see how you get on over the next few years into 2024, into 2028, where you see you're going to be at your best, even better than you are now. So really, really exciting times ahead. Welcome to the ICOACHKIDS family, Jordan, and we hope to catch up with you soon.
Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Now to move on to our next session of the day. We're joined by Dr. Nicole Lavoie, and Nicole is a senior lecturer in the area of social and behavioral sciences in the School of Kinesiology at the University of Minnesota, where she is director of the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport. She received her master's and doctoral degrees in kinesiology with an emphasis on sports psychology and sociology from the University of Minnesota. After completing her graduate work, Dr. Lavoie was a research and program associate in the Mendelssohn Center for Sport and Character at the University of Notre Dame, where she helped launch the Play Like a Champion character education through sport series, and was also instructor in the psychology department. Through her multidisciplinary research, she answers critical questions that can make a difference in the lives of sport stakeholders, particularly girls and women. As a leading scholar on women coaches, Lavoie has published numerous book chapters, research reports, and peer-reviewed articles across multiple disciplines. Her seminal research includes the annual Women in College coaching report card, which you'll hear more about soon, which is aimed at retaining and increasing the number of women in the coaching profession, and a groundbreaking book, Women in Sport Coaching. For more, we're going to head over to Sergio Larabertial, who will conduct the interview with Nicole. Over to you, Sergio.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our next session. My name is Sergio Larabertial, and I'm one of the founding members of the ICOACHKIDS Global Movement. It is an absolute pleasure to introduce tonight one of the most influential minds in the world of female sport. Dr. Nicole Lavoie is the director of the Tucker Research Center for Girls and Women's Sport at the University of Minnesota in the US. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for accepting the invitation to join us today.
Absolutely, Sergio. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Now, listen, let's start at the beginning, okay? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal history in sport, and what led you to start researching girls and women's sport.
Yeah, so like most of the people tuning in, we have a love for sport. I was a youth athlete. I decided to focus down from 3 sports to tennis around high school, and I ended up playing tennis in high school and in college. Had a pretty good career at the collegiate level here in the US, and I really loved tennis, and I wasn't quite ready to give it up, so I went into coaching. I was a certified USPTA teaching pro and worked a lot with the USTA on various programming that they had, and coached at the collegiate level for about 6 years. And the last time I was coaching, I was at an all-women's college, Wellesley College, and it really got me interested in the intersection of gender and sport. Because sport had given me so much as an athlete, as a coach, it gave me a career pathway. But I really realized that I wanted to make a difference in the lives of girls and women in sport, not just one team at a time, but lots and lots of girls and women, perhaps around the globe. So I quit coaching. I went back to do my doctoral degree at the University of Minnesota at the Tucker Center when it was just starting in the mid-90s, and got some more in-depth training. And really from then on, I followed my passion for girls and women in sport and for coaching, education, and development. Because as a young coach, I had a great tennis mentors. I knew tennis My parents were teachers, so teaching and coaching kind of came naturally to me. But I looked around and I thought, ooh, I see a lot of coaches doing a lot of things that are really destroying the confidence and the self-esteem of their athletes, and I think we can do better. So I really just followed those two guiding principles of making a difference for girls and women and educating coaches to be better, to, you know, optimal performance, good experience, and optimal development for all athletes. So that's sort of, and then I landed, I went away for a couple of years to Notre Dame and worked in the Center for Sport and Character, and then got recruited back to help run the Tucker Center, and I've been there almost 20 years as a faculty member since.
Wow, that's a fantastic, fantastic story, because I mean, what comes across really clearly is that you are on a mission. You have a very clear mission of what you want to accomplish. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. You've mentioned two elements: the situation for girls in sport and around their participation, and then the coaching. So let's talk about the participation first. And I know when I listened to you last time at the ICC conference in Lisbon, you said you always have to start with the problem. So can you define to me quickly what is the problem with girls and women's sport? Where are we?
Well, there's a lot of problems, but I'll give you sort of the big ones. So what we know, and this is true in the US, but I think it probably applies around the globe as well. There's a gendered participation gap between boys and girls and men and women. So here in the US, we have a lot of record numbers of girls and women playing sports due to Title IX, which is a federal law that made gender discrimination illegal. However, there's still a gender gap at every level, and I am pretty sure, because I know the data around the globe, that's also true. So that's one. And the reason why that matters is that when girls are denied the opportunities to play sports, they don't reap health and developmental benefits that we know that can accrue through sport participation, not that it's automatic. But that's a different discussion. Number two, in terms of women in sport leadership, we have an underrepresentation of women leaders in sport as coaches, administrators, board members at all levels. And what that tells girls, young girls, is that they don't see people like themselves in positions of power, so they don't aspire to that. And also, same identity role models matter for everybody. And a lot of girls and women never get a female coaching role model, and we know that that's problematic. So those are sort of kind of the big ones. There's a lot more, and we might want to talk about the barriers, but you know, that's a rabbit hole as well, because there's many.
So if we go down that rabbit hole slightly, but let's approach it from a positive perspective. Are you aware, either through the work that you've done yourself in terms of promoting participation for girls, or the work of maybe some of the governing bodies of sport in the US, who's getting this right and what are they doing to get it right? Who's got a good handle on this is how we make sport more accessible to girls, for them to, because I think the challenge is twofold, right? To get them there and to keep them there.
Yes. Well, and once keeping them there is to have a really good experience, which obviously for lots of girls, if they don't have a good experience, they're going to quit. So there are a lot of people around the world that are doing really good work at the grassroots level, and probably many of them I don't even know about because there's so many good ones, but I can speak to one in the US that I think is particularly exemplar. It's a program called Girls on the Run. It's a national program that's school-based, and it has female coaches that are trained with a curriculum that's evidence-based. It's sort of a sports-based youth development model, so we're using running, but we're also teaching life skills. So we have girls, we have it women-led, so it's same identity role models, an evidence-based curriculum, and then they have evaluated the program as well in terms of its efficacy, which is not always the case for these programs. And they have shown that there is transferability for the life skills, and it also sustains girls' physical activity outside the program. So I really like that one. I've been tracking them for years, and I would point to them for sure.
You mentioned the idea of, well, if we want to keep them there, we need to provide positive experiences.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you a question, and I think I know the answer from having talked to you before, right? But obviously, I think sometimes we get dragged into the discussion of, oh, we have to coach girls differently, and it's kind of, we're putting the blame on the girls. But good experiences and good coaching is the same for boys and girls, right? Or what do you think?
Absolutely. I get that question all the time. You're at the Tucker Center and you do coaching. How do we coach girls? And I have a twofold answer on that. One, yes, good coaching is good coaching. The gender or sex of an athlete is one variable. Not the most important one, but one. So I think first of all, when we coach girls, we want sound methodology and pedagogy based on coaching science of what we know works, because there's a great body of knowledge around that. Secondly, I think it's important to think about that the way that maybe it differs is that girls experience the world differently than boys because they're girls. They face gender bias, stereotypes, harassment, sexual abuse and harassment. They have a lot of different experiences in the world because they're girls, and I think there are some particular things for girls in terms of body image, body positivity, gender stereotypes that coaches need to be better educated on around coaching girls. And we at the Tucker Center are working on a new curriculum around that will launch in 2022 called Coaching Her. So stay tuned.
I think that I love the way you've really put that across in terms of yes, so good coaching is good coaching. I think that's kind of the key message. It's like tonight it's about giving people clear key messages. Good coaching is good coaching. And there are certain things that you need to be aware of when coaching girls, because they may be more relevant to them because of the experience of being a girl in the current world. Okay.
Yeah.
So we look forward to seeing that resource coming out, and we will do all we can from ICOACHKIDS to promote it so it gets to as many people as possible. So you've talked about how important it is for girls to see same gender role models, either as coaches or administrators. And I'm aware that you've done quite a bit of work to rock the boat in this sense in the US. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the work that we do in the Tucker Center is evidence-based, and we don't do, the work we do just to publish in a journal. We wanted to make an impact. So some of the work that we do around female leadership in sport is around creating awareness, educating, and creating accountability. And one of the ways we do that is we have a Women in College Coaching report card where we give a grade to institutions and sports, A through F, just like students. And it's just one way to sort of put them on notice and say, for all the girls and women's teams you have, what percentage of those teams have a female head coach? And then they get a grade. So if you have 10 teams and you have 7 out of 10 or above of women coaching those teams, you would get an A, which is fairly generous. But what I've learned is that grades get decision makers' attention because they're competitive, and they always, well, I wouldn't say always, many of them want to do better. And it just generates a discussion, and we can track change over time, either progress or decline. So, and what's interesting is the sports that get Fs. So if you have 24% or lower of women head coaches, you get an F. And what's interesting is all those sports, the governing bodies or the leader of those sports have called me and said, ooh, we have an F and we have a problem, help us. So I've used that report card as a leverage tool to then talk to decision makers to help them create a better culture that values and supports women.
I believe that, since you started publishing the report, things have got better. it's really had an impact.
Yeah. And I know it has an impact because the percentage of women head coaches is ticking up slightly every year. It hasn't gone down. And people tell me that they're paying attention and that they're really striving to get a better grade, or they'll bring me in or others in that do this work to help them be better. So we'll see.
And that's the situation in college sport, right? Which is quite a professionalized part of sport, even though it's not supposed to be professional, but it's in terms of the fact that these coaches are paid to do their job and the intensity of what they do because they're coaching every day. What's the situation in terms of female coaches more on the grassroots or recreational sport?
Well, from the data that I have, it's interesting because you'd think that from college sport down through, high school, youth club, and down to the grassroots level that you'd have more women. But in fact, the numbers actually go down. So here at the youth level, in the college level, it's around 43% of women head coaches. At the youth level, it can be 20% or less. So, youth sport or grassroots sport is very gendered. So when you do find women, they're not head coaches, they might be assistants, but a lot of times they're the team manager. And colleague of mine, Mike Messner, who's at USC, a sports sociologist, he has done work on this, and it's called the team mom. So, the moms are getting the snacks, doing the scheduling, doing the uniforms, shuttling kids back and forth, but they're not usually at the club director level or the head coach level. So youth sport is a very gendered enterprise, if you will.
And that genderedness of youth sport in the US, what's that down to? Is that a cultural thing? What are the main barriers stopping women being more prominent in youth sport?
Well, it's not because they're not qualified or competent or want to do it. It's that they're often denied the opportunity, and this is what we found from our research. We asked women at the youth level, how do we get more women coaching? And they're like, ask us. We have the parent meeting and it's like, okay, Johnny's team needs a coach. Who's going to do it? And they look at the dads. It's like, look and ask the moms. And a lot of the moms that we know are way more qualified and have played at a higher level than the men. And so ask them, get them involved, make it easy for them. Have a co-head coach. When you're a parent, male or female, your own children get sick. So, or, have other appointments. So have a co-head coach. Make it easy. Have female-only training where they feel safe, where they can be knowledgeable and get their competence up. And there are a lot of not easy, but intuitive ways to get more women involved at the youth level.
I love the way you put it. Just ask them. Don't make the assumption that they don't want to do it, and that it is a man thing to do, right?
Yeah, perfect. And, to that point, Sergio, a lot of times we blame the women, like, oh, we don't have women, they don't want to do it, they don't apply, they're not qualified, they're not confident enough. These are blame the women narratives that just are not productive. And when we blame the women, we don't have to change our processes. So that's a quick way, just ask women, right? Don't assume, and move forward from there.
Right, so listen, on that note, and it's been a fascinating conversation, and we could be here all day, really. But we've got limited time tonight. Just give us your, what's your summary of where we need to go in all of this in one sentence?
In one sentence.
Or two.
Well, okay, so I use this statement a lot, and I borrow it from the Wellesley Centers for Women. What's good for women and girls is good for everybody. And I think, when we create policies that support and value women, and we create systems and cultures where women feel supported and valued, it helps the culture for everybody. So I don't want it to only seem like this is a a woman-only issue or a girls-only issue. It's the right thing to do, and it's good for everybody.
I love that. You know, what's good for women and girls is good for everybody. So just to wrap up, any idea of when we're going to be able to see those new resources so people can tune in and be ready for them?
Yeah, we are hoping around June or July of 2022, we will have a product available to the public for coaching her. But in lieu of that, if you want to go to the Tucker Center website and just type in Game On Women Can Coach Toolkit, there are a lot of great resources there right now that they're all free and they're all evidence-based.
Brilliant. Well, we'll make sure that we will put all that information on the chat and make sure that everybody knows. Nicole, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. All the best. And I know I got you very early today because it's evening time here, but it's very early for you. So thanks.
I have my coffee right here, Sergio.
Yeah, it must be strong coffee because you were amazing. Thank you very much. And we will see you soon. And everybody, I hope you're enjoying the conference and see you at the next session. Thank you.
Wow, what an insightful interview, and so much food for thought when it comes to engaging more women and girls in sport. A huge thanks to Nicole Lavoie for sharing, and thank you to Sergio Larabertial for his facilitation of this interview. It's now time for another short interval. This time we'll be back in 10 minutes. After the break, we'll be joined by Tabo Huntley as he presents how him and Special Olympics have created e-learning for Special Olympics coaches. And we'll also have our expert panel on engaging girls in sport. We'll be right back after this.
Kids are made to play, and getting kids moving is more important than ever, with only 1 in 5 getting their recommended daily activity levels. When kids move, their health, social skills, academic performance, and mental well-being can improve significantly.
In fact, positive experiences with sport are key, and this is where coaches can make all the difference. Through Nike's Made to Play commitment and partnership with ICOACHKIDS, we're here to support you in giving the kids the best introduction to sport and activity.
Our 5 chapters will show you basic coaching skills and give you some very practical knowledge and ideas. So let's get coaching.
In this video, we are going to explore some strategies to help increase the motivation of young children within sport. Coaches are a source of many things such as technical skills, physical literacy, but also motivation. Today, we will look at 2 key theories associated with what we call intrinsic motivation. Those that have high intrinsic motivation do activities such as sport for the love of it and have an internal can-do attitude. They don't need too much external motivation, like a reward or someone telling them to do things. The first theory is called self-determination theory, or SDT for short. This was developed in the 1980s by 2 academics from the United States called Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. SDT is based on the assumption that humans have 3 basic needs, and these needs must be met in order to function to full capacity and grow to their full potential. This theory has been used within hundreds of sport performance and sport coaching studies. These needs are competence, autonomy and belonging. Let's look at them one by one. Competence is about having a sense of control over the outcomes we seek and experiencing the mastery of a skill or task. Autonomy is associated with feelings of empowerment and ownership over one's actions. And finally, belonging is about experiencing feelings of connectedness with others and the task in hand. So, let's have a look at these elements and how we can put them into our coaching sessions. Coaches can create feelings of competence by providing opportunities for success with a given task, activity or game. This might mean ensuring the challenge point is just right for each participant. This might mean changing things like the size of the ball or racket or the distance between participants depending on what they are doing. What we ask them to do must allow for a sense of competency to emerge. In other words, they have to be able to do it or learn to do it with a bit of effort. Next, a sense of autonomy can be supported by allowing children choice over their actions. This can be done in a variety of ways. For example, in a sending and receiving activity, the coach could offer a variety of objects and equipment for participants to actively choose, depending on their level of ability and confidence. It could be associated with giving the kids a choice of what activities they want to do and engaging them in the design of the session. Belonging can be supported by offering a sense of being connected with others and to something bigger than oneself. This could be done by integrating group work into your sessions and ensuring positive relationships with your participants. For instance, can you ensure you say hi to every participant on arrival? Can you make sure children know each other's names? Or what about organising a team bonding outing to the movies or bowling night? These examples help children feel part of the sessions you deliver. So, that's self-determination theory, and hopefully we've provided you with a few examples of how you can integrate this into your coaching. Now, onto another theory called Achievement Goal Theory, or AGT for short. This theory was developed by John Nichols in the 1980s. AGT is related to different approaches people take in situations where there is a goal to be accomplished. The two main approaches proposed by AGT are the so-called mastery and performance orientations. People who focus on effort and personal improvement without comparing themselves to others are said to have a mastery orientation. On the contrary, people who focus comparing themselves to others that are only satisfied when they outperform others are said to have a performance orientation. Research shows that children who have a mastery orientation will persist more, have better coping strategies if they don't immediately succeed, and will generally have a more positive attitude to learning. On the other hand, performance-orientated children will generally select easier tasks, be concerned with the thoughts of others in the group, and give up easily if they fail at a task. The thing is, every child will have a motivational preference that is a leaning towards mastery or performance orientation. Some participants can even be both at the same time. Importantly though, research shows that the climate coaches create can push children into one orientation or the other. Given what we know about the benefits of a mastery orientation, as a coach, we should seek to support the development of this orientation in our participants. So, what we should do to support the development of a mastery orientation. Here are some ideas. 1. Praise effort over performance to help support mastery orientation. 2. Set targets around mastery and not outcome. For example, can you get a clean strike of the ball when passing it, rather than can you make 8 out of 10 passes? 3. Focus on development over outcome. For example, in young participants, we should focus on the quality of the movement in a tennis serve more than whether or not it resulted in an ace. 4. Avoid making clear comparisons between participants' level of competence. So there you have it. Now we have a few more tools and ideas to help support high quality motivation in sport. Please go and use them and see what happens. Thanks for watching and see you soon.
Hi everybody and welcome back, and now on to our penultimate session of the conference. Dr. Thabo Huntley has a unique blend of experiences in leading, developing and working within high performance teams. These experiences, which already span over 18 years, involve roles such as performance director, head coach, lead sprint coach, coach mentor, head of fitness and talent development manager. However, whilst each role has offered unique insights into the performance domain, success has been underpinned by a single drive to deliver cutting-edge solutions in order to achieve stated performance outcomes. By adopting a position of shared values, Thabo seeks to facilitate environments that allow individuals the freedom to share their expertise, knowledge, and passions so that the team own principles, own the process and the outcomes. Now a senior lecturer teaching on both the undergraduate and postgraduate sport coaching programs at Liverpool John Moores University, Thabo seeks to engage students in deeper learning through the sharing of experiences, values, and expertise in an attempt to encourage students to take ownership of the learning process. Specifically, Thabo leads modules along the lines of strength and conditioning strand and teaches modules containing high performance sport, Paralympic and disability sport, and elite coaching themes. Thabo, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Sergio and the ICOACHKIDS team for having me on this evening. It's a privilege to be here, and it's been fascinating to see how ICOACHKIDS has grown over the many years, actually. So thank you very much for inviting me to share with this. So in terms of the presentation, I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction into why we need to support coaches of athletes with disability, particularly in Special Olympics. I want to take you through a methodological approach as to how we went about developing an e-learning course. I'll introduce a couple of the chapters, and then at the end, I just want to have some time for some questions and answers as we move on. So within the EU and the United Nations, and even with International Paralympic Committee, Special Olympics International, all have significant policies that are related to providing people with disability with high quality sporting experiences. And particularly within the Special Olympics, children and young people with intellectual impairment are the least active of the disabled population because they face a whole lot more barriers, not only from non-disabled sport, but also the disability sporting context. And so the inception of ParaCoach, which is an Erasmus Plus funded project, which looked to increase the kind of education and learning of coaches in unison with Special Olympics. We came together to kind of think, okay, how do we solve some of these issues by and allow people with disability, or particularly children, to access greater inclusive environments. And we felt that the coaching workforce is crucial to achieving these policy and social aims. And for that to happen, we require a well-educated and skilled workforce. And in reality, we do recognize that there's some coach education out there that's focused on disability, even though there's a paucity or there's a lack of that specific education. We do know that there's something out there that, the parts that is ad hoc. So it's, there's some good practices dotted around the globe, around the EU and around the UK. So our intention with this is to drive from, make sure there's a connection between policy, education and practice, and hopefully from practice, education up to policy as well. In terms of methodological approach, we, from an academic perspective, wanted to create a third, what we call a third space. This is where the academic space and the sporting landscape come together. And it's kind of like a hybrid zone where you have multiple people sharing their thoughts, their experiences, their theories around learning. And somehow we have to negotiate that. And it's really important that academic space and the sporting space come together, because in that negotiation, I think that's the place where we can, we believe we've created something that's really special that will be released through this e-learning course. But the point is that, from an academic perspective, we didn't want to design something that was just led by experts, but we wanted to be the facilitators of an incredible organization such as Special Olympics, and their goal to help create an effective learning and engaging environment for coaches of their athletes. So in terms of kind of a procedure, what did we do? And the first part of this process was to create a global workforce audit, because again, speaking with the likes of the Special Olympics team, of which Jennifer Hansen isn't able to be here, or Fiona Murray isn't here today, but we wanted to look at the workforce audit. So not just say, this is what we think is going to be effective within this global population, but we wanted to see, what were the needs of this particular cohort, and particularly in the Special Olympics context. We wanted to do a needs analysis in terms of, what's their demographics, what's their experience, what's their educational, what's the qualifications, what's their knowledge, what's their gaps in knowledge. And so we had somewhere over 275 coaches around the world fill in the online survey. We followed this up with some follow-up interviews to get a more of a richer account of the kind of contextual factors, given that we were spread across the globe. And then what we tried to do is take that the results and the findings from the workforce survey, and just present that to regional leaders across the 5 continents, athlete leaders, making sure that the athlete voice was represented within this. We had interactions with medical advisors, the fitness team. So again, it was this kind of collaborative process that we were trying to facilitate throughout. And then we went to this creating space, working with the e-learning company to create the script, to review the script, to create the chapters, because it's all very well the academic team putting together the script. That we needed to work with the e-learning company to say, how do we make this engaging, and what are the things that we need to simplify, and what are the things that we need to expand on. And that was really helpful, actually working with the leaders in Special Olympics International to also talk about, what is the kind of the academic language, how does that translate to a global population. So we did have some points of negotiation about levelness, about terminology, about how do we simplify theory, and then at the same time, from an academic perspective, we wanted to ensure that this course actually promoted learning as well. And then the final phase, which we're coming out of now, is around the refining space, where we're just looking at the platform, looking at how everything flows together, how the jigsaw pieces are coming together, how the assessments run. So, we might have ideas of what an assessment may want to look like, but actually in reality, what does that look like and feel like for the learner as they take part in this particular process. And obviously, we want to kind of highlight any glitches that might be apparent. So what we did is come up with a number of chapters, and that goes from introduction to knowing disability, to looking at inclusion and empowerment, to understanding your participant. We needed to put something around safeguarding and welfare, and importantly, we wanted to give 2 chapters over to coaching practice. What does that really look like when you actually delivered some of this stuff? And that was a really fun aspect. And again, these will all be ready for viewing, if you guys register when we release the course in January. But what I wanted to do was basically look at one of the chapters around knowing disability. And what we found was, if you look at a lot of the research into why people with disability are ostracized, is because around stigma about how disability is perceived. And so it was really important for us to look at knowing disability and seeing how different models can help us ensure that people can be integrated within sport and physical activity. So that was one of the chapters. And then we looked at mission, values, and beliefs, in which we hopefully have a little bit of a video. I don't know if will it play?
Coaching research often highlights the close relationship between our values and beliefs and our coaching practice. That is, the way we coach. Therefore, if we want to become more effective coaches at creating inclusive and empowering environments, it is important to consider the reasons why we coach, our values, and the ways these values meet the needs of our children with intellectual disabilities. To explore our values, it may be helpful to develop a vision, values, and mission statement. In doing so, it communicates to others the type of environments that we want to create as coaches. Given that children with ID are less likely to participate in sport and physical activity, a well-crafted, clearly communicated vision, value, and mission statement displayed on a website or on leaflets or on pop-up boards may be the first encounter children and their parents have with you and your club.
So that was just a little flavor of our chapter on vision and mission, vision, and values. We have a number of different chapters. Like I said, we just wanted to give you a quick flavor of what that looks like. And the important thing is the essence is around inclusion and empowerment. Not just do we include people, children and young people within our sessions, but actually do we create an environment that allows them to flourish, for them to be empowered to make decisions? Do we look at things like life skills? So that's kind of the essence of the course itself. And in terms of, I don't know why that slide is it. So we are going to launch the course on the 17th of January, so you can register post that. So we're really looking forward to releasing that down the line. But what I wanted to do, I think we've got 2 minutes remaining. Was there any kind of questions around any of the processes, or any questions you may have that may relate to what I've presented so far?
Thanks, Tabo. Some fascinating insights there, and again, another organisation really starting to look forward with the different provision of coach development, including future online resources. I wonder, with e-learning becoming a little bit more prominent in coach development, especially in this modern society, the modern situation that we're in, what are the key learnings you've taken away from developing these courses, and what advice would you give to other organisations and federations taking this task on?
Yes, gosh, what we've learned. For me, the important thing is that the e-learning course is just one part of a myriad of ways that a coach can learn. And it's more about trying to present some information and trying to do that in the most engaging way possible. Not just death by PowerPoint, as potentially we sometimes have at universities, but really trying to promote some form of reflexivity. So the way we model the assessments and the way we word the assessments kind of allow coaches to have to really think about what are the things that they've learned through the particular chapter. We've got kind of reflexive pieces. So there's some questions along the way that promotes kind of independent learning. And I think for us, what I'm keen to do is to support this with some form of like workshops, seminars, interactive workshops to maybe take a chapter and then work through that with a group, maybe over time. Because they are becoming popular. But they only work for certain types of people, don't they? And coaches will tend to cherry pick what they want to do. So it's trying to be engaging, but also understanding the limitations and what else do you need to put alongside in order to support learning.
And I guess in starting to encourage coaches to be reflexive, what are the kind of key positive impacts on kind of challenging and evolving coaches of athletes with different needs, different values and beliefs about what coaching is?
So how do we promote reflexivity with coaches?
Yeah, and how does that help evolve the values and beliefs of coaches to be more inclusive of athletes with different abilities?
Yeah, okay. I mean, for us, a lot of courses tend to provide some practice experiences, but those practice experiences work at a very kind of superficial level, and that's okay to do a good job in terms of how do I set up my session. Now, those are some of the kind of the coaches who are passionate, who are involved, who want to be there. So what we're trying to do is to also target coaches who may have some form of, let's say, fear or lack of confidence, or they may hold some form of stigma against people with disability. And for us, it's really important. That's where the reflexivity comes in. And what we do is provide a number of critical questions that they can respond to. And in so doing, we're hoping almost lowering any kind of protective mechanism, trying to lower that and say, actually, you know what, this is a really important context to coach in. It's children's human rights to have, you know, really good, high quality coaching experiences. And actually, if you do this course and engage with this course, we will take you on a journey. You know, we're not expecting you to be the ready-made coach. And, you know, we all make mistakes as coaches, for goodness sake. We do that all the time. So, you know, for us, it's realizing that people are on a journey. And if we can move everyone one step, whatever that looks like, then, you know, for me, that's the important thing. I mean, the deep kind of reflexive thought, you know, I think there are particularly individuals who may warm to that quite quickly, and there may be others who might think that's not for me, you know. And we know from coach learning, the coach learning literature, that coaches some cherry pick certain types of knowledge, and it takes a little time to get them warmed up, to expand, you know, what we would call in sociology the kind of sociological imagination. Do they take on something new and fresh? But I would suggest that comes through relationship and developing a relationship. And I think it's something that ICOACHKIDS have done well in terms of, you know, developing a kind of a global movement. So that's what we're trying to kind of emulate with Paracoach and with the work we're doing with Special Olympics International.
Excellent. Thanks, Tabo. That's all the time we have for questions this evening. But I, for one, will certainly be logging on January the 17th with these resources, and I encourage all of our audience to do so. What a great resource to start 2022 with. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
We're now on to our final session of the ICOACHKIDS conference, which is an expert panel on engaging females in sport. Chairing the panel, we have Dr. Annette Stride, and Annette is a principal lecturer and course director of physical education in the Carnegie School of Sport at Leeds Beckett University. Her research and practice are both underpinned by a social justice agenda, and her research adopts an intersectional approach to consider how gender interplays with other identity markers, including age, sexuality, ethnicity, race, and disability, to influence different women's and girls' experiences of physical education, sport, and physical activity. Annette uses her research to inform her practice, including as a coach to a weekly football session for women staff, students, and community members that has been in operation for over 20 years. Joining Annette on our panel, on our expert panel, we have Jose Neto, head coach of Brazil women's basketball, Nadra Hafiz, a boxing coach in the UK and postgraduate research student at Leeds Beckett University, Elizabeth Thebrian, head of women in basketball and special projects at FIBA, and Paul Carson, chairman of the board at the Coaching Association of Canada. Hello all, and over to you, Annette.
Hear me. I just wanted to say that I'm really delighted to be sharing this panel. As you can probably tell from the introduction, it's an area that I'm really passionate about. It's one that I've lived. Like many young girls, I was told what sports I could and I couldn't take part in, and luckily I didn't listen, and it fired me up to I think really in some respects it sort of began to dictate how my career began to look. So it's those early experiences have certainly fueled my research interests and my coaching. It's a topic area for me that unfortunately we still need to champion in both research and practice. Girls are still being inadequately served by poor early experiences of physical education in schools. Professional sports women are still fighting for equal pay, and we still have an underrepresentation of women in sports leadership roles, as one of our earlier speakers alluded to. So we need change, and it's something that ICOACHKIDS are extremely committed to achieving, hence putting on this panel this evening. And the panelists that we've got with us tonight are certainly contributing in lots of different ways to make this happen, and we're going to hear about that in the next 30 minutes. So we've got a series of questions to sort of signpost to the panel, and the first one I wanted to ask Betty, how did you get into basketball? And were there any moments during your sort of teenage years where you thought about dropping out of the sport?
Thank you very much, Annette, and I hope you can hear me. And it's my big pleasure to join this panel today. Well, I am originally from Spain, so being close to 2 meters tall, you can imagine that this was not easy life for me in living in Spain. And honestly speaking, now thinking about those days, it was really tough. You can imagine the average age for girls or women are 165, and I was over or close to 2 meters. So it was tough, but I have to say that I had a fantastic supporting team around me. And I will start naming my mother as a key person. Obviously, she was very tall as well, and that's the genetic I got from her. But she always supported me, reminding me how special and unique I was. And this really helped me to grow my self-confidence and also strengthen my self-esteem, obviously. But in addition to that, how I then discovered the sport was thanks to my PE teacher at school, who was capable to, or immediately saw obviously my physical condition and athletic skills. And he was the one proposing me to engage more in sports, and especially in basketball due to my size, right? So, and this is when I start to play organized sport, and suddenly I really felt like a big sense of belonging to a community, right? And this feeling accepted and somehow connected to my peers really, I felt like, okay, this is where I wanna be and I wanna stay. So at the same time, also it fueled somehow my self-worth and at school. So I wasn't the tall giraffe anymore. I was the proud basketball player, right? So this, I had ups and downs during my whole process, of course, but I would say that if these pillars are strong and stable, at the end you will manage and you will keep going. So the most important thing I would say that this nowadays sport is still a key part of my life and made the person that I am today.
Yeah. Okay, that's a lovely story. So sport almost became a safe space for you growing up. Yeah. Okay. And I wondered if I could ask the same question to Nadra in terms of how did you get into boxing, and how sort of easy or difficult did you find it to access the sport?
I actually got into boxing later on. So I was 18 at the time, so it was my first year of uni. For me, I got into it because I'd gone through quite a difficult time. My grandma had passed away and I was struggling. So it was more of from a mental health perspective, as well as physically, I wanted to get fitter and stronger. And so I called up several clubs, and I happened to speak to my head coach then, and he was the most welcoming on the phone. I just got an amazing energy and a vibe off him, and I didn't bother calling anyone else at that point. And then I went into the gym, and I was the only girl there for the session. But the coaches, all the boys, the boxers, they all made me feel at home. And I think that's what it was. I just felt at home. And I can't describe it in any other way. I didn't feel like I was the odd one out or anything like that. It was anything they could do, I could do. And so it was a very, very positive experience, I'd say. And I'm aware that for everyone it's not like that. I've just been very privileged in that sense.
Yeah, that's it feels like we've rehearsed the answer between yourself and Betty, because we both, you've both talked about sport feeling like a safe space for you, feeling like a home, feeling like it's somewhere where you belong at a time where you might not feel that in the sort of wider world. What else who else do you think has helped sort of facilitate your involvement in boxing, or do you feel that there's been any challenges to you being involved?
I wouldn't say For me, I'm very blessed in the sense that I've got a very supportive network. I mean, my mum doesn't want me to get punched in the face. I mean, I don't think any any mother wants that, but she's very supportive. But I think the enablers are definitely the people that you have around you, the coaches, your peers, the other boxers that are a part of the club. Because it's all to do with the environment that you walk into. If you feel comfortable and you feel included, you're more likely to stay. And so I think they're like the key people in your life, are your family, your friends, and your team. Although it's an individual sport, boxing, we're a team at our gym, and it's all about supporting one another and having that unity and that network.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nadra. Thank you. I shall come back to both you and Betty, but I wondered if I could just ask you a question, Jose, about basketball. So Betty's talked about her experiences growing up in Spain. I wondered if you could just describe the sort of current situation with basketball in Brazil in terms of the sort of participation and retention of women and girls in the sport.
Hello for everybody. First of all, I deeply appreciate this invitation and the opportunity to share a little of my experience and ideas in women's sports in Brazil, especially basketball. So let me talk a little bit about the Brazilian basketball. Basketball and Brazil are no strange to each other. Men's basketball won back-to-back world championships in 1959 and 1963, and was runner-up in 54 and again in 1970. Brazil and Great Britain are the only ones to have played in a world championships. And the women's basketball belong in a very exclusive club alongside the US, the former Soviet Union and Australia, being the only 4 nations to have ever won a world title. We won the gold in 1994, and the Olympics, we won the silver in 96 and the bronze in Sydney, Australia. Some Brazilian players have been inducted the FIBA's Hall of Fame, names like Hortensia Macari, Maria Paula, and Janet Arcan, among others that Betty knows better, no, Betty? Although Brazil did occupy the top spot at the sometimes history, women's basketball is unfortunately a not popular sport in the country. If you take Brazil's size in its population, it's a very small number compared to some much smaller European country where the sport is much more popular. We have a few competitions because we have a few teams here in Brazil. We are currently partnering with FIBA America, the Brazilian Olympic Committee, and Estácio University to create teaching schools and training centers. We believe the more mentors we have, the more popular the sport can become. The young women who stand out there have been given scholarships to play in high schools and universities in the US. We have over 50 girls currently playing in the US. Although this is a fantastic situation for the athletes and for their evolution and development, it's very hard for us as a nation to keep them here due to the difference in structure and overall conditions. We see it as a long-term investment, as these athletes gain knowledge and experience to eventually be able to play for their home country in future competitions. They are certainly role models that inspire other young girls to join the sport of basketball.
Thank you. Do you think it's a sport that's growing in terms of girls' participation, Jose, or not?
I believe these major barriers are few competitive teams and a few competitions. coaches with very little or not at all focus on the player development and evolution, which leads to stimulus to compete. You know? Other priorities, school, work, family needs. I think it's so.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, I wondered if I could ask a similar question to you, really, in relation to ice hockey in Canada. You know, what is the sort of participation and retention rates of girls in that sport?
Well, I think ice hockey is probably a similar landscape to girls sports right across Canada. We were very fortunate through the 90s to see some tremendous growth in youth hockey on the women's side, but it plateaued as we got into the early 2000s, and through the through the period of sort of 2010 to 2020, the real focus became retaining young girls in the sport. So you could see a wonderful inclusion of young girls between the ages of 6 and 10, but a drastic drop off after that. And again, that's a reflection of the landscape in young girls in sport, is that, you know, between that age of 10 and 13, if the experience isn't right for the girls, if the opportunities that they're having in sport don't meet their needs, there's a good chance they'll drop out. And we know that from the statistics that boys tend to, I don't know if it's right to say put up with a little more, but they do. So you see 1 in 3 girls dropping out, whereas you see 1 in 10 boys dropping out in those age ranges. So I would say that ice hockey isn't a whole lot different than any of the other sports across the country. I think the reality is, and you know, at one point here, I have to mention, Dr. Lavoie's presentation, like, there's just so much there. All you have to do is capture all that she talked about to know what the challenges are. And I know we'll get to these in a little while, but, you know, in Canada, we have the Canadian Women in Sport. We have Jumpstart, which is a Canadian Tire charity. And then we've got Sport Canada. And we've got, you know, wonderful advocacy for research and understanding young girls and women in sport, and, you know, trying to put together better plans and better processes to support the growth of young girls and women in sport.
Yeah, you've linked me nicely into the next question that I was going to ask you, which was, could you give us some examples of any initiatives that are that sort of exist in Canada to try and drive either girls' participation or to try and retain more girls in youth sport, and if you think they're working, and you know, if not, why not?
Well, I think Dr. Lavoie talked about this very specifically, and that is leadership and role models in youth sport. And what's really important in my mind is that women lead women's sport. That's the bottom line. I think that in the case of, I'll give you an example. We have women coming into coaching roles in sport, and Dr. Lavoie talked about the fact that at the grassroots level, there's a real challenge there. So you start to work your way up the pyramid. Who's responsible for training coaches? Who are the coach developers? Beyond the coach developers, who are the administrators that support the coach developers? So the goal really is to have this chain of role models all the way through the system, so that female mentors support the growth of coach developers, who support the growth of coaches, and women relate to women who are providing them with instruction, providing them with support in their community. So at Hockey Canada, for example, we have a program called the Master Coach Developers Program, and it is specific to women. So we recruited, over a period of 2 years, we recruited 36 cohorts who participated in the program. They were educated through all of the necessary channels through the National Coach Certification Program in Canada. but they were also receiving information like the research done at Tucker Institute, like the research done by Jumpstart and Canadian Women in Sport, so that they understand what the issues are and they understand the challenges that they're confronted with. Now, are these working? It's a little early to say, but I think the longitudinal study on this will demonstrate whether or not more young girls are drawn to sport and more young girls stay in sport because they have female role models, female leadership, and they're in a much safer place in that sport environment.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask a similar question to yourself, Jose, about any initiatives that you think are working or not working in Brazil in terms of trying to drive participation up in girls basketball?
We don't have what the US or Canada does, which are great competition in school and university levels. We only have professional teams. We just recently resumed the under 23 national tournament. There was a big gap between the under 19 and the professional level, which doesn't have that many teams. Therefore, a lot of young girls don't get picked by these teams and ended up quitting the sport. We plan to have an under 20 competition next year, and in order to help keep these players active and avoid this gap.
Okay, thank you. Betty, in terms of FIBA, what are they doing in basketball to try and drive participation globally?
Well, let me start saying that we had a key milestone, or I want to mention the key milestone that happened in 2019 during the FIBA Congress that we had in China during the World Cup, that decided to put the priority or the focus on women in basketball. So that was the first step where really we saw something happening, right? So after that, the first thing we did was to run like a worldwide survey, trying to measure and evaluate a little bit how was the global landscape in women's basketball to help us tailor the strategy, let's put that way. Obviously, it's not easy when you work at world level trying to find proper projects that suits or meets all the purposes. But we identified some key areas, development areas, and obviously our main goal, one of the main goals, was to increase girls' participation. So to achieve this, we decided to launch like a global or worldwide campaign that is called the Her World, Her Rules campaign. So we decided obviously to put some funding there and support, but we knew from the beginning that money will not be enough, because you really need to give money, this is for sure, but you also need to provide and develop like a full concept and tools for federations to develop this campaign or this program, right? And this is what we did. So we developed this concept. We provided communication marketing tools and also a whole package of branding materials for federations for free to use and free of rights. So, and then federations, to benefit of this campaign, they had to apply with a project that suits their own needs, because you cannot compare, you cannot do same things in all the countries and all the continents. So at the end, we just set some rules and guidelines that all of them have to follow, but giving the freedom to federations to develop their own project based on their needs. And this was very welcome, because obviously funding is always nice and welcome, but also I think to give this whole package helped them a lot to get out there and develop activities and festivals that the girls really welcome, right? So now, last year we support 70 national federations, and for 2022, we just actually today we opened the call, the application for 2022. So we are just waiting for the results, but we are confident that this will be positive, and we invite and encourage all of you to go and see on the social media the Her World, Her Rules campaign.
Okay, that's brilliant. So we've heard a little bit. I think I'm going to be told that I've got to wrap up my questions in a minute, which is a shame because I could talk to everybody all night. We've heard a little bit about national and international policies. Nadra, I wonder if you could just sort of sum up for us, really, as a coach, what kind of support or environment do you think you create to kind of engage and retain more female boxers?
I think the main ones is an inclusive environment. You know, to have an environment that whoever walks through the door, they feel like they're welcome and they can be themselves. And I think that's a huge part to do with that is the club's attitudes and ethos. So what are you about as a club? What's your coaching philosophy? And I think that's a key part for coaches to have this kind of conversation as a coaching team, but also with the athletes as well. What do you define as the club values and ethos? And as well, like in a lot of clubs, having pictures of female athletes, successful female athletes, having female coaches there. I always remember my head coach saying, "Look, Nadra, it's great them having a male coach, but there's only so much they can relate, and I can relate with them because they need a female coach to have that relatedness and those open conversations." And I think it's also about building positive relationships. I think relationships are key, no matter who your participants are. Building positive relationships, that's a foundation.
Brilliant. I think we probably will have to wrap up then. It's a good time. It's a good point to end on, because I just want to say as well, congratulations, because I know that you have been accepted onto the UK Coaching Women's Coaching Programme today, I've heard.
Yeah.
So you're obviously doing something right. Yeah, well done,
Thank you.
Nadra. I think, is somebody going to take over from me and tell me to wrap up, or do we have any questions? Do we have a chat facility or any questions for the audience?
Annette, I'll jump in here and thank
brilliant.
you for facilitating
Thanks for saving
this amazing discussion. Oh, you definitely don't need saving. Again, like you, Annette, I wish we had hours and hours. I could sit here all day and listen. I guess we've got time for one question, and I guess one of the core underpinning themes over the last 2 days of this conference has been around the importance of the athlete's voice, and in this case the woman or the girl's voice. I wonder what experiences different members of the panel have of engaging more women and girls in the conversation, and asking more about why they're involved in sport and what really motivates them to take part, in order for coaches to really start to adopt and adapt those environments. Anybody like to go first?
I don't mind starting off. I have
Paul.
to go back about 25 years. I was mentoring a coaching staff in a female games competition, and it was probably the first time where I was a little bit stunned when I was in the dressing room listening to the coach address the players, and the collaborative conversation that was going on during the talk. In male hockey, the coach talks, everybody listens. In female hockey, there was discussion about whether or not that was the right approach to break the puck out of the zone. And when I was out in the hallway later with the coach, I said, you know what, I have to totally rethink things here, because that is not what I've expected and not what I was used to in the coaching environment that I was in. And so I found it really very early on, my education in better understanding the type of open and communicative environment that young women want in their sport experience.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I also think language is a major part. You know, there's things like, oh, you run like a girl, or you punch like a girl, and it has very negative connotations. And I know having these open conversation with my boxers, like, it's like, yeah, what is punch like a girl? What is run like a girl? because if it's what I do, then it must be pretty damn good. And so it's kind of reframing or reshaping these. And I think in a lot of environments, just eliminate those kind of terminologies, those phrases, because it's quite discriminatory, and it's uncalled for, really, and it's not creating an inclusive environment. So I think the language we use as coaches is very, very important.
I fully agree with Nadra, and also I think sport has to be a platform to help these girls to grow and express themselves, right, and to reach their goals. And I think this conversation obviously is easier if you have women that are your role models, that are creating pathways, and then for you to follow them, no? Right? If you don't have these role models or you don't see them, it becomes more difficult to see any future there. So that's why I think it's really important to create this networking and feel that you are in an environment that you are accepted and integrated. Yeah.
And I think that some of the role models that we have on this call right now, and the teammates that you all work with, are really, really leading the way, are real trailblazers in this work. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do. Thank you, Annette, for facilitating this conversation this evening. And thank you to Paul, Betty, Nadra, and Jose for joining us. I wish we had longer, but I'm sure we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So that brings a close to the ICOACHKIDS 5th International Conference, another year down. I think you'll agree that our panelists have done an incredible job of sharing their expertise, experiences, and insights. So thank you to all of our speakers. I would also like to say a special thanks to the ICOACHKIDS partners and supporters who continue to raise the agenda of putting children first in youth sport. Thank you also to everybody behind the scenes today who've made this conference happen, to Sergio Laraberthial, Sheila Quinn, Barnaby Sargent-Megix and Karen Livingston of the Conference Organising Committee, to Cassia and Camille and all of their team at Global Public Health Network and technology partner Streamit.cafe for giving us a fantastic platform to present. A huge thank you to Andrea Almeida and Rebecca Ritchie, who provided simultaneous translation for this event in French and Spanish, helping us to reach new corners of the world and growing the global movement. Both gracias and merci, if I've said that correctly. Thank you to our team at Extreme Creations, James, Beth, Sally and Lucy, who've supported us with the promotional campaign for the event. And to you, our audience, delegates from over 60 countries who've shared your time to help us spread the word. Thank you so, so much for joining us. But there's also an opportunity to win, and to be in with a chance of winning one of 3 books from both iCoachKids and ICCE partner Human Kinetics, please complete a short feedback form on this conference, which will be emailed to you following this event. The full conference will also be available to watch on demand via our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/iCoachKidsWorld, almost immediately after this event. Be sure to stay connected with us via our website, iCoachKids.org, and all of our social media channels at iCoachKidsWorld, and continue the conversation. See you all soon.